Hello. So, welcome everyone. We've got me and Andrea here to look at the wonderful world of guy who keeps making statements.
I'm excited. I cannot wait to get your take on this.
Well, your take seems to be an outlier on this one, and that's really interesting because, quite frankly, when I hear everyone has one take and Andrea's got the other, I'm like, is everyone else wrong? Because I feel like that is a possibility.
Sometimes I am just contrary, but okay, so I have to disclose to you up front that I do have a bit of a bias watching these because my very first impression of this guy is I want him as my lawyer. And the reason why is because it was December 31st, okay, New Year's Eve, when he released the public statement, on Brian Kohberger's behalf. And then the following day, New Year's Day, where he released the statement on behalf of Brian Kohberger's family. So this guy went so above and beyond the call of duty, okay? Like doing any sort of press assistance for these people is not, you are not required to do that. Like stepping up to help with that is really next level. And then he's doing this over the New Year's holiday. Like this guy, he's the public defender that you dream of getting. You can just tell he's a believer. So I was a fan from him from the start. So that is my bias I have to disclose.
Yeah, just the thing that makes me twitch is some of the stuff I've been hearing that might have been in these statements, and that's sort of my in these interviews. So that's my sort of concern there, and whether or not he's causing more trouble than he'd like. So that we'll just have to see. But
let's see.
All right, let me see if I can successfully bring up this video because I was having no end of trouble with trying to get it sort of in a situation where we could actually watch it because we don't want to be watching it like directly off of Twitter. And I think I've got it, and I think I've got it all stitched together. So let's see if we can bring it up here. And this is the interview where we've got, was it Elton in his car?
Brian Enton, yeah.
Or Enton, yeah. And we'll just have to see, hopefully, I know YouTube is not able to recognize things like, hey, this is what fair use looks like, but hopefully they don't shut us down. And I've got some people saying, Andrea's a little choppy. Yes, bad connection. We're going to do what we can.
Do you want me to try to shut down and come back? I can try and see if
it helps. Let's give it a shot and see if it helps. But if not, we'll just sort of keep going.
Okay, see you.
See you in a few. And in the meantime, I will mess with the leather work. I've got another pouch that I'm working on here. I've been working on making a bunch of these. So pouches on the go. Ali Foley 82, thank you very much for the gifted memberships. Same Rabbit. I'm just trying to keep track on all of that. Sandra Ramirez, thank you for the membership chat there. Hello, everyone. And Tia Nina, let's call ourselves the Fellowship. I like it. All right, just trying to... and I see I'm missing a super chat that I got a star. Nicholas Starrow was just the first, and then referencing back to it, I'd say it was tactics, and it could have been a great one. But then he kept talking. Yeah, we're going to have to see what all he says. So that will be part of the fun. So this is what I'm working on now. It's kind of blue on blue. So one shade of blue that hopefully transitions into another shade. We'll have to see sort of what we're looking at here. And there we go. Oh, that's not promising.
I hope that this works.
Oh, still kind of robot-y. Which
sorry about that, guys. I am hardwired here, but I think we got something going on with our service today.
Yeah, I mean, it happens. It's kind of annoying because we're so much, when we do the YouTube things, we're so much at the mercy of all sorts of things.
Yeah.
And I've had things where you tell people like, hey, we'll I'll be there for a live stream, and then my internet went down. So maybe try cutting the video. I'm just wondering, we might get might improve the audio. Is that
does that help at all?
I think so. I think the audio is better.
Okay.
I've got Secret Labs customer support saying Andrea's poor connection is almost certainly because you're sitting wrong. This is a running joke because my chair is Secret Labs, and when I told them how much it was falling apart, their response is always, "Oh, you must be sitting wrong." And I'm
You're
like,
sitting wrong.
It's a chair. How many ways can I be sitting? Like, what do you want from me? But all right, let's try to bring up this video here. And I think I've got all of that stitched together into one big video here. So
Mr.
hopefully
Labar,
we can get that.
when you first met Brian Kohberger in Pennsylvania, what was your first impression?
When I met Brian Friday night, the night he was arrested, Brian was very cordial. He was calm. He was aware of what was going on. He was shocked by the arrest, but he certainly was easy to talk to, very intelligent, and I really had no issues talking to him.
Did you talk about the details of the case?
When I walked into the room and I shook Brian's hand, before Brian could even, I think, say hello, I basically cut him off and said, Brian, I'm merely your attorney for your extradition. I don't want to know any of the details about the actual facts or circumstances of the case or the allegations against you. That's for your attorney once you get to Idaho to talk about. I'm simply here to talk about the extradition and the elements surrounding the extradition proceedings.
Now, I mean, already I'm like, why are they filming this like where they're just recording this reporter in his car?
I don't understand showbiz.
Because clearly they've got a cameraman here, right? So they had to set that up with a cameraman recording him in his car.
They set it up with a cameraman recording in his car and then focused on the, Elantra or whatever it is outside instead of on him. Small detail.
I just feel like, that would have been great if they had like, if that Elantra had a for sale sign on it, like for sale by owner. That person would be just like, fending off offers right now, going like, yay. Now, I see people saying that the audio is poor. I'm going to see if I can re-encode this and turn up the audio in the video because the
audio in the video is very bad. I've seen a couple people try to stream this and it kind of invariably doesn't go well.
Yeah, I'm going to see if I can turn it up on my end, just trying to, trying to fix that because otherwise we're going to get lots of people going, why is this so quiet? But all right, let's try but that'll take me a moment to re-encode. So we'll just have to see, but it is what it is.
So we heard first, magic horror words that all of the lawyers didn't like to hear, which is, Brian told me, I told Brian. Anything so far raise any red flags for you about that?
One of the first things is that they're potentially foreclosing certain arguments that might be made later by counsel. Mm-hmm. In the sense that if they later want to argue that, he's not with it or whatever else, it's like, well, your lawyer said this and, said you were lucid and said you were understanding and said you were coherent. And I'm like, I also just don't like any of my lawyer said this. I like that he's very much hedging away from, hey, we're not going to talk about what actually went down. Because when they're dealing with extradition, of course, he doesn't want to know any of the details at that point, right? That's, but still, they're getting into discussions about that and his impressions of, what this guy sounded like. And nothing at this point is too fatal, but it just makes me start getting nervous.
Very fair.
And, I can't say like any of this I mean, I don't think Kohberger was ever going to be able to run like an insanity argument or anything like that. But if he was going to try, all of this is bad for that, right? Because especially if he ends up presenting differently to a psychiatrist than he presented to his lawyer. Because, like, what happens if he goes and gets a psych assessment, and in that psych assessment, he's behaving incoherently? It's like, well, now we've got evidence that maybe you were faking it in the psych assessment. So, I mean, that's not, I don't think it's a big risk, but it's at least closing a door. So that's sort of my initial takes here. I'm just trying to see if we can... All right, let's keep going. We'll try to sort of listen very carefully, and then we'll see if we can turn up the volume here as we go. I just added this to my render queue with a volume boost effort.
Did you get the sense, because he was getting his PhD in criminology and had his master's, that he had a good understanding of the process more so than like a regular client you may have?
Well, you have to understand the clients that I normally have don't even have a high school education, let alone a degree from a college. So it was much easier to talk to him about how things would proceed and how the hearing would go than my usual clients being a public defender. But yeah, it was pretty easy to talk to him. He was aware. He did ask questions about how things would go. He wasn't fully aware of the legalese behind the hearing and what would be expected, but I certainly know after explaining it to him, he understood.
Why did you decide to release the information about the Indiana police stops? Because I think we got it from you first that those stops had happened.
I think it is accurate. It came from me. It really just came in conversation with Brian and his father. I was aware that I was trying to make sure that they knew the date that they came back from Pullman, just to make sure that it establishes that he would have been in and around the area at the time of the incident. Never contested. He had been in Washington State University up until mid-December. But when I talked to his father, he had talked about being stopped on the way home twice by Indiana State troopers, twice back-to-back. So it's something his father had told the FBI or Idaho State Police or Pennsylvania State Police, whoever interviewed Michael here in Pennsylvania. He had already told that to authorities, so I felt comfortable saying it as part of one of the interviews that I had done, that he had been stopped, because I felt a little suspicious about it, that he may have been followed from Washington State, although I think that has been debunked to some degree.
Yeah, I know there was a big theory as to whether or not the police had, or the FBI had directed those stops, which would actually have been really interesting, although it doesn't seem that that's the case. They've denied that. But that would have been really interesting if they had, because at that point, we're getting into a whole mess of other issues, right? Like, are these just pretextual stops, and then is the information that they gained from it just trash? I don't think that the information that they gained from it ends up being terribly necessary either way as well. Doesn't look like they're relying on that a whole lot. I mean, it just kind of seems like, yeah, we just happened to pull him over before. Some people in chat are saying, hey, is it an issue that he raises the fact that most of his clients, don't have a high school education? I don't think that is an issue at all. Like, that's not tiable.
I see that as almost like a service, that he is letting people in on this feature of our criminal justice system. It is undeniable that the overwhelming majority of people that, yes, are the public defender's clientele, way more likely to not have a high school education, way more likely to have, a like foster family type of background, way more likely to have the background of a family that is also, been incarcerated, way more likely to have just all of these kinds of problems like that. It is a very complicated, socioeconomic issue when you deal with crime. And I think that for a lot of people that are interested in the system but don't participate in it, because this is not your community, more than likely, if you're, an educated person with a college degree, you tend to be around people with similar backgrounds. And the reality is that the people who make up the bulk of the criminal class are not from that same background. And so having that perspective into that system, I think, is just so valuable.
Yeah, for sure. Because I remember I had a judge at one point. I was doing, what is it? This was just in court, but acting as duty counsel. And there was a guy in on a breach of a bail order. He'd been released on bail, and he was now back because he'd broken that bail order. And the judge was like, well, how did you not understand this bail? How could your client not understand this bail condition? It's printed on his release documents. And I had to explain to the judge, I'm like, well, first, this bail condition has like 3 clauses to it. And second, he can't read.
Yeah, my client's illiterate, Your Honor. Have you met an illiterate person before? Because I meet a lot of them.
Yeah, and it was just like, you've handed him this document and told him that he's got to follow all the conditions on it, and he can't read it, right? And it's not like he's going to go to somebody and be like, hey, can you explain to me what my bail conditions are on this serious charge? And then everyone knows what that's about. Like, no, he's just muddling through as best he can, and it's frustrating because our system largely spends a lot of time incarcerating people who are poor, uneducated, and struggle. And I see somebody saying, I'd argue there's likely more rich criminals because they don't have the money to stay out of jail, or they have the money to stay out of jail and even prevent investigations. A lot of money, where money comes in, is preventing the stuff they do from even being crimes in the first place.
Yeah, exactly.
Like the example I always give here is if you go, like, let's say you're working at, the Quickie Mart and you take $20 out of the till. Well, that's considered a pretty serious crime. Where I am there, they say, listen, that's something that you almost always will get jail time for. But if your boss shorts you a half hour of work on your schedule each day, because they say things like you have to clean up and then clock in after the floors have been mopped, which is, not legal in most places. But let's say that takes you half an hour each day. That adds up to way more than $20 a week, and, might have been going for like 20 weeks. And the courts will just say, oh, that's a civil problem. Mm-hmm. And even if they've been ripping you off like that, and, ripping you off for that, money every week, and you take the $20 as like, hey, this guy owes me a pile of money, I'll just take some out of the till and we'll call it even. You're going to jail and he's not.
Yeah.
So, we managed to prevent the stuff that a lot of rich people do from being crimes.
Yeah.
Like if I go up and pepper spray somebody on the street and they'll give, for no reason, they'll give me jail time. But if I'm running a factory and I have a release of toxic gases that, affects 1,000 people, it's like, oh, well, that'll be a monetary issue.
Not a point source. Nothing we can do about that.
Yep, exactly. It's like, oh, well. And
I did see somebody in the chat asking about the prison illiteracy rate. And so I don't know that there are like real solid statistics on this, but there are a lot of studies. And, the highest one that I've seen is in the ballpark of 75 to 85%. Now, I think that probably depends on your definition of illiteracy. If we're talking like 12th grade level, then yeah, I definitely believe that. I have a lot of clients that I can communicate with in writing, but you're speaking at a very simple level. So just offer that for what it's worth.
Yeah, and I saw somebody in the chat was saying we didn't do proper introductions. So I think people know who I am because they're here, on the channel. You do criminal defense work, correct?
I do. Yes, I'm primarily a criminal defense lawyer. I have been for about 15 years now. Most of my practice is contract defense. So I've done trial work. I've done appellate work is all I do now. I haven't done trials for a few years now, but that is my background. This is my wheelhouse. This Jason Labar, he's my compadre. So,
And I think that's important because there's a lot of commentary from people who've never done criminal defense, and I'm not calling anyone out here or anything like that, but criminal defense is kind of particular, right? It's
yes, it is.
it's an interesting sort of world there. And go Hoshane, I will try to let people know. I'm really sorry to hear that. That's tragic, but I mean, that ties into criminal defense. The number of people, just because of the fentanyl, epidemic that we see, all of my clients know somebody who's died, pretty much, right? All of my, and I've had a number of clients where, like, you get somebody who comes in and clients refer each other to you. So you'll often have clients who are friends of each other. And just a few days ago, I had a client who's like, "Hey, do you remember this guy?" And I'm like, "Well, yeah. I mean, he's how's he doing?" And they're like, "Yeah, he died." And I was like, "Oh, And I know they know each other because they referred each other sort of my way, but it's just like, "Oh, he died." And there's so much of that going around. There's too many tragedies, but it really kind of illustrates the different world that people live in, right? The different kind of scenario there. And I'd agree with you on the illiteracy thing, right? Because how do you define it? And if you're defining it as like, able to read some of these complex legal documents, very few of my clients.
Yeah, exactly.
I had one guy who sent me, he was like, "I want to know the cases you're relying on." And I was like, "Sure. Okay." Like, we were doing an appeal. So I was just like, "I'll send you all the cases." And he was like, "Can we have a meeting so that you can read these to me and explain them to me?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'm not getting paid for it, but yes, we can do that." I also love appellate work, and I think that is something. You become a better trial lawyer doing appellate work, and you become a better appeal lawyer doing trial work, if that makes sense.
No, I think it does very much.
You've never really thought about your trial work until you've been sitting there looking at an appeal going, "Did they preserve this issue for the appeal?"
Where is my proffer?
You're just like, "Come on." I had one where I was just sitting there staring at this lack of objection, going like, they should have objected to this, right? This is absolutely a problem. And the guy didn't object, and I was just like, "Oh." And the Crown prosecutor was actually nice enough. I called him up and I was like, "I got a problem because I've either got to open this up to ineffective assistance of counsel, or what are we going to do about this?" And he said, "I will concede that this objection can be heard by the court, even though quite properly it probably shouldn't have been." He was just like, "I feel that this should have been objected to, and it's a plainly bad, the issue here is plain and obvious." And we have a bit of a different tradition with our prosecutors. We get less of the like when you look at wrongful convictions in the States, there seems to be a lot of like, "Hey, the prosecutor was sitting on evidence that they knew shouldn't be provided," or that sort of thing. Whereas my experience has been a lot of prosecutors who very much take the integrity of the system a lot. And the line you'll hear quite commonly is people saying like, being a prosecutor is great because you never win or lose. You just present the case. And, at the end of the day, the court decides, and that's just it. And I was like, that's how it should be.
That's a good way to look at it.
Yeah.
How about look at it as I lose at trial? It's just the case, man. It's just the case. I'm not a magician here.
I mean, as defense, I feel like sometimes we lose because, you're very much, arguing for a side on that. But at the end of the day, I mean, I've had clients who are like, you got to win this for me at trial. Like, listen, the only way you win this is if something really goes badly for the prosecution. They have to screw up because that's what it looks like here. And sometimes that happens.
Sometimes they trip awful hard on the way to the podium.
Yep. I remember one where the prosecution was like, well, this one witness didn't show, and I don't think we need them. We're going to proceed without them. And I won, and the decision we got basically said, had I heard from this one witness,
Wow.
I might have come to a different conclusion. But I didn't, so I've got reasonable doubt. And I was like, ooh.
Wow.
And my
that
client's
one
like,
him up at night.
well, my client's like, you're a miracle worker. I'm like, no, you got a miracle, but I was just here to take advantage of it. But I mean, when I told you were gonna lose this one, you were gonna lose. Like,
Yeah.
why are we? So, yeah.
So take
All
this
right.
gift that fell in your lap, take it, appreciate it, and improve your life.
Yep. And I mean, the other thing is people are like, well, what if somebody gets away with something? At the end of the day, when somebody, and I'm going to stop this one and see if we can start another. I'm just looking at where we are in the timing on it. When somebody sort of gets away with something, people are like, oh my God. And I'm like, here's the thing. We get one of two outcomes. Either the guy never commits another crime, and great, or he does, and we pick him up on the next one.
Mr. LaBar, when you first...
All right, now we've got louder audio, but it might be choppier audio.
Being stopped.
We'll just have to see how, why couldn't they have done this with they just tie this, they've got equipment to record phone calls. This is frustrating me that they're doing it in this guy's car. But, all right, let's see what they have to say here.
On the way home, twice by Indiana State Troopers, twice back to back. So it's something his father had told the FBI or Idaho State Police or Pennsylvania State Police, whoever interviewed Michael here in Pennsylvania. He had already told that to authorities, so I felt comfortable saying it as part of one of the interviews that I had done, that he had been stopped, because I felt a little suspicious about it, that he may have been followed from Washington State, although I think that has been debunked to some degree.
So when you were representing him in Pennsylvania, and I saw you in court, obviously you had limited information. Then when we got here to Idaho, the probable cause was released. What was your reaction? I'm assuming you've read the 18 pages. What was your reaction to all of that evidence?
I immediately was given the affidavit of probable cause when it was released, if I recall correctly, by... I'll restate this then, Brian, so it's clear. I'm just trying to remember who actually gave it to me the second it came out. So I immediately read the affidavit of probable cause. I believe a news media outlet that I had been in touch with sent it to me the second it was released. I read over it 4 times, I think, until I soaked it all in. And obviously what I had read, I now had an understanding of the evidence against him, because I had been working in the blind the entire time, because I didn't have access to the affidavit of probable cause or know anything about the facts and evidence that they had against him to verify the arrest.
What was your reaction, though? Were you surprised by the amount of evidence? Did you think it was solid?
I stated a couple times to other individuals and other outlets that the way I would classify it, based upon my experience doing this for 17 years, read about 25 homicide affidavits of probable cause at least, and represented several homicides, capital homicides, through trial. I wasn't too surprised. I thought it was a strong circumstantial case that had holes and that could be exposed by a competent, good defense attorney like Attorney Taylor, I felt.
I don't really like that answer in the sense that what I saw quoted in a lot of places, and I mean, I've been avoiding watching this, but lots of places quoted that as case against Kohberger seems strong.
Yeah.
Defense lawyer says.
Yeah. Yeah, this is a situation where perhaps his inexperience with media is betraying him a little bit, because I feel like a very savvy media attorney would understand how their statement will be clipped. and repeated. And so, you develop ways to phrase things or formulate your thoughts in a way that makes it much harder to cut you out of context.
And I mean, one way to deal with that is just to be stupid levels of confident, even if those levels of confident are unjustified. Because if you just come in and you say, yeah, I saw their case and it looked like garbage, then sure, maybe you get embarrassed later, but at least a juror gets to see the quote of case is garbage. Which, I mean, but, instead of seeing the quote of case is strong, and somebody came in late, Runkle, what is going on here? We're reviewing the Kohberger interviews because he did a bunch of them. So we're just sort of looking at that. But I agree with him in the conclusion on this, in the sense that there's a bunch of circumstantial evidence, but I was looking at it, and I think a lot of others were looking at it and going, okay, great, but is this all you got?
Yeah. Because the problem with this case, what he means by it being a strong circumstantial case is, yes, it is circumstantial, and sometimes circumstantial cases can be very, very strong. But the problem is, if you don't have that direct evidence, then those circumstances, those inferences that you have to draw to reach the conclusion, they are dependent on each other. And so if one of those falls, your case it can be a house of cards. You can really undermine the basis for everything that follows from that. So yes, it's a strong circumstantial case right now, but hypothetically, if they lost, I don't know, the pings, if they lost the roommate description, that type of thing, these can potentially undermine the basis.
The roommate description is not super strong at the end of the day.
Well, no, yes, it was not a strong piece of the substantive case. It was definitely a critical part of the probable cause process. Being able to reach that, because they needed that to be able to get the warrant, to get the cell phone information, and then use that, to be able to corroborate the movements of the car, that type of thing. So it's not going to likely end up being important at the end of the day when it gets to trial, but in terms of being able to pinpoint this is the guy we're looking for, without her, that doesn't happen.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the biggest things about her testimony is that her details there is just like, we looked at it and he's not excluded by her, because she just says like a tall guy with, bushy eyebrows. And I'm like, that's lots of people. But at least, when they're saying, hey, we looked at this guy and he matches that description to the extent there's a description. Because, I mean, she could have said all sorts of things, right? She could have said, hey, the guy's Hispanic or black or, short, or any of these things that they would have said, well, this is not our guy. That's, I think, a little critical there, but it doesn't, I don't know if they didn't do a lineup with her, because I hope they've done a lineup.
Yeah.
Right. And what we haven't heard is she was able to pick him out of a lineup. Mm-hmm. They can't do a lineup now if they haven't done one, because at this point they've blown that, right? She would have seen his face too many times on the news.
I would think, yeah, it's just too suggestive at this point with all the coverage, assuming she has been exposed to that.
So I assume that they must have had her do a lineup, and which suggests to me that if we haven't heard anything, like if it wasn't in the affidavit, maybe she wasn't able to pick him out.
Yeah,
and that's I mean, if I'm the defense, I'm like, you saw this guy, he scared the crap out of you. You were, however many feet away, and then you can't pick him out of the lineup.
Yeah.
Maybe it's not
Well,
him.
there are so many ways, so many tools the defense has to really nail down the potential problems with this description or even an identification that came from them. Just from the circumstances alone, you're presumably dealing with the aftermath of having, found your roommates dead in your house. This is going to be a very high stress, high traumatic situation. It's not particularly conducive to forming clear and accurate memories of the things that you're observing. It's just a naturally distorted process. So, I mean, even in the best case scenario, I think the defense is going to be able to challenge this recollection just based on the circumstances, in which she had it.
I mean, I would have loved to have seen. I would have loved to have seen them do like a photo lineup of here's 20 different pictures, pick one out, and because I mean, if she was able to pick him out of that, then that becomes much stronger. But
it
I
does.
haven't seen that.
And I think if they were looking at this for a trial perspective, if they're looking at is she going to be able to identify him for trial, then yes, they 100% have to do that. For what they ultimately did use it for, though, I think it was adequate because all they needed is just a basis to have individualized suspicion of Brian Kohberger as opposed to any of these other, 10 or 20,000 or however many, Hyundai Elantra owners there were that they were looking at. Those ones don't have this build and these bushy eyebrows, but this guy does. So it's justified to focus on him under those circumstances.
Well, and the other thing that really kind of stands out in that affidavit is they put a lot of stuff in there that seemed to me to be public relations as opposed to the affidavit. Like, look how much work we've done on this. We weren't just sitting around doing nothing and waiting for somebody to drop into our lap. Look at all the effort we put in. And I feel like they were trying to, like, part of their goal there was just to try to defend themselves from the public because they were getting some criticism on that.
Yeah.
So that's a
good point. I hadn't really thought about that, but I think that's a good perspective.
Because they seem really detailed on some parts of the thing that I might not have been as detailed on, and really thin on some other stuff. And I mean, I sort of see it as there's either one of two possibilities. Either they're being thin on the other stuff because their case is actually going to be a little thin, or they're just holding back because they don't want to reveal their full case at this point. And they're being more detailed because they want the public to know that they were actually investigating the hell out of it when they were getting all that criticism about, like, why haven't you guys caught this person yet?
So look, we found the murderer. How haven't you found him yet?
Yeah, well, I did see some people who were saying we found the murderer and they found all sorts of random people, which is often the way when the public decides to get in on this stuff. They're like, yay. But yeah, I mean, I sort of mentioned there was a couple of details here that if you add those details in, the case blows up.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know how good the DNA is. It could, we may have issues of transfer or whatever else, but if the guy has a girlfriend in the area, their case goes to heck. It goes pretty badly because it's like, well, now all our ping data doesn't actually tell us much. But who knows? It's this one makes me nervous. I would like to see more evidence on this one, just because when I look at like the false conviction cases, a lot of them had better evidence than this.
Yeah.
So
no, I think that's a good point. And that kind of brings us full circle back to my position on this public defender and what he's doing here and what he's trying to achieve, which is just the absolute frenzy, that was unleashed on Brian Kohberger the moment his name became public, and just the instant fascination, the digging up for every weird and incriminating looking detail we can find about him, this massive confirmation bias being fed. He's this creepy incel weirdo killer. So let's go dig up everything we could find that could possibly support that. This lawyer is the one guy that Brian Kohberger had in the position to stand up and say, hey, all I'm saying is he's got a presumption of innocence. Let's go, maybe just hold off. He talks like a normal guy, seems reasonably intelligent, not obviously bizarre and disturbed. Let's go ahead and let him have his process.
I think I wish that the media was a little more clear about saying, hey, listen, let's be, let's slow our roll a little bit and not leap to conclusions. Because when we see wrongful convictions, and we always got to think of that possibility. And I know people are going to say, hey, listen, hey, this guy is a bad guy. And I'm like, I don't know that yet. We got to wait and see the trial. We got to see what shakes out. But when we see the wrongful convictions, so many of them, point very heavily to, oh, this person was weird in some way. With what's her name, who was the Dingoes Ate My Baby case.
Oh yeah, Wendy Chamberlain.
Yeah, they went heavily on her religion. With
Amanda Knox and how she did a headstand in the police station.
Yeah, all of these things they focus on these weird things, and I've told clients before, listen, there is no right thing to do in the police station, but really the less things you do, the better, right? Because you get, I've seen things where, there's somebody who he's sitting there having been arrested and he was whistling in, because they'll do that thing where they leave the guy in the interview room.
Mm-hmm.
Just to see, just to freak him out. Because if you leave the guy there for an hour, and the guy started whistling. And man, did they put a lot of, they were really big on the fact that he was whistling in there. And I'm like, dudes, he's bored.
He's bored out of his mind. What is the matter with you?
Yep. I had one where the guy tried to, he literally just curled up under the table and started sleeping. And they were going, oh, well, this is a sign of guilt. And I'm like, or it's a sign that you arrested him at 3 a.m.
Yeah.
That's, the guy's just tired and you're leaving him alone and he's bored. So he's just going to go try to have a nap. So, yeah. The thing I liked least is talking about his demeanor, because I always worry about what you say about your client and the discussion of the conversation. That makes me nervous. So I guess let's sort of hear some more here.
All right.
What would you say the biggest holes are?
I have been talking about the biggest evidence and going step by step, because defense is going to attack each part of the evidence separately, really, because the Commonwealth's case is really based upon circumstantial evidence. There's no direct evidence against Brian. So their case is in the whole, whereas defense will be attacking each piece of evidence individually, I believe. At least that would be my trial strategy. So if you talk about the sheath being found in the room, you have DNA recovered from the button of the closure of the sheath. What you can say about that is it's transferred DNA, it's touch DNA. That DNA could be on there. Nobody knows how long, if undisturbed. Certainly it could be a year, it could be longer. Experts going to testify that obviously it was placed on there because Brian touched it, but they can't say when he touched it. Now there could be a
I feel like this is really important with the DNA discussions, because lots of people think, and I've heard like prosecutors say this, oh, we've got DNA, it's an open and shut case. DNA can come from all sorts of, like, DNA, you know, reliably we can say that DNA ties to a specific person. What we can't reliably necessarily say is how DNA got to a place.
Yep.
So just because you've got DNA doesn't mean guilt.
And the information that we actually have about this DNA is not, we don't have a lot. People don't necessarily realize that DNA is not exactly a black and white thing. Like, there are issues with quantity and quality and the, you know, parameters that are used to evaluate the comparability, like all of these decision points that go into a DNA analysis that do affect the outcome. And all we get is just this report that, well, it's, you know, 99.99 or whatever % likely that the father of the person left this DNA.
Yeah.
So, but that doesn't tell us. I mean, okay, so it tells us that they have reached a very strong, you know, probabilistic conclusion that tends to suggest probably have high quality DNA, but that doesn't necessarily tell you much about, for example, was this DNA associated with a biological fluid? Was it associated with skin cells? Were there anything like that that you were able to recover that can give you some insight into the source? Like, DNA that comes from saliva tells you a different story than DNA that comes from a skin cell. And that can also really factor into these questions of, well, is this likely contamination? Is this potentially, you know, a small, like you're saying, a small amount of transfer DNA? If you have a very low quality, low quantity of DNA, it's going to be much more consistent with, well, that, you know, you shook hands with Brian, the killer shook hands with Brian Kohberger and then fingered his knife, you know, you can get a small amount of transfer DNA like that. So there is definitely room to maneuver with the DNA for exactly the reason you said. All it tells you is that, you know, you can get to some degree of certainty and identity from it, but you don't get anything about the circumstances of how it got there.
Yeah, and I mean, as an example, like, let's say they find, you know, this is sort of, because I've talked to like law students and stuff, and basically saying like, hey, I find that for a lot of people who are coming to law school, one of the things that you have to do is kind of wake up the notion inside them of what reasonable doubt can mean and how to attack a case. Because you can end up with these cases and you look at it and you're like, well, this seems really strong. And then you have to start picking at it, right? And seeing, like, does everything hold up? And one of the examples is, like, let's say you find a body and right next to the body is a cigarette butt that matches this, you know, known violent guy. Well, how do you know when the cigarette butt got there? Maybe it was there 3 days before the body was, in which case, you know, does that change your assessment of the case? You bet. The other thing, people, like, we don't actually know that this sheath ever contained the murder weapon.
Yes, very good point. Very good point.
Like, I mean, it could have, but that doesn't mean that it necessarily did.
But they didn't even tell us in the PC affidavit that, like, the wounds were consistent with a K-bar knife, such as would go in the sheath. You know, they didn't even give us a little hint like that.
Yeah, and I'm just like, so maybe they were stabbed with a K-bar, but what if they were stabbed with a kitchen knife? At that point, do we even care about this sheath at all? Like, you know, it might be something of like, how do we explain it? But if the wounds don't match, then this is, you know, this is going to be a real problem. So, yeah, and transfer DNA, sometimes it can be really, really thin. Like, the sense of, you touch something that somebody else's DNA was on, and then you touch that and you've now transferred it over. This is why crime scene investigation can be a problem too, right? If they inadvertently contaminate things.
Yes, 100%. This is why absolutely, like, reviewing those details of the collection process and the protocols that they use, everything that's a potential gold mine for defense lawyers. They have to mind their P's and Q's because the risk of creating a false impression, based on just inadvertently, handling this, and then you didn't change your glove before you handled this other thing. It can just be these small little thoughtless types of decisions that get made. One thing that I learned in a case that I handled really recently is that the labs that do this type of testing obviously have their own protocols, and a very, very important one is that they never have the samples out at the same time. Even in like opposite sides of the same room, they don't do that. And it's just because there is too great of a risk that you might accidentally dip your pipette, somewhere where you didn't mean to, not paying any attention to it. These are human errors. They're things that people just do without thinking, that we all do all the time without thinking. You just, as much as we'd like to think we're 100%, on and attentive and everything 24 hours of the day, that's just not reality. So these things do happen.
I had a case where we got DNA results, and they basically said DNA from one person was on everything. And then we got a follow-up result saying basically, we screwed up. This was from the lab. They said, we actually thought that this was weird, that this one person's DNA was on everything. And turned out, like they said, it contaminated a glove, and then that glove contaminated everything else. Mm-hmm. And they were like, yep, we should have changed, this person failed to change gloves as they were supposed to, but they contaminated everything. We don't know, so we actually got from the lab, like, hey, because of this error, all of this DNA evidence we don't know. We don't know if it came from our comparison sample, and our comparison sample tainted everything, or if it came from one of the, the test items. Wow. So at that point, you're just like, well, okay. Prosecutor's like, I guess we're not introducing any DNA evidence on this one. I was like,
yeah,
yep, that is the case. It's just, it happens. I do like that he's talking about like the reasonable doubt aspects, because I've told clients before, like the line I've used to clients is, I am your only friend in the universe right now as it comes to this case.
Yes.
Because, I've told them, like, don't go to your friends to talk about this, because a lot of people will already think you did it just because you've been charged. And they can talk to the police about it. They can talk to the police about anything you say here. But nobody else is going to defend you like I will. So this is a problematic case, because I feel like this guy's been convicted in the media before he ever stepped into a courtroom.
Yeah. Well, now let me ask you this, because I think we both agree that for any of this to not be a major problem for this defender, he and Kohberger worked this out. Like, this is a mutually understood and agreed upon, and probably, hopefully, signed off 20 ways to Sunday in writing, what exactly this public defender is doing with these statements and this public, media strategy. He obviously can't be talking about what they talked about, with or without his dad in the room, which is the one thing I heard that kind of, I wish you hadn't have said that, but whatever. If you're going to be talking about that type of thing, and you have not had an explicit waiver, from your client of your ability to say that, then I mean, it's just, that's like per se a problem, that's game over. So the fact that he's continuing to do this without apparently, no indication of like a cease and demand, nothing public from Ann Taylor saying, hey, would you mind maybe not, maybe like stopping now. Nothing like from the bar, nothing from, anybody that's inclined to keep him in line. I think this is planned. They did this on purpose.
Either he's got a waiver, or else, and I mean, I would want that to be super freaking clear in terms of, I don't want anything vague in my file. I want, something super important. And I'm scanning that. I'm storing it on 4 different things because it's like this one document is my career. Because if he's shooting from the hip on this one and doesn't have all of that stuff, he's potentially done.
Exactly.
I'd be going to the bar going, and I mean, if I was Ann Taylor and I found out that he was doing all of this and, and he didn't have a waiver and this wasn't part of a plan that I signed off on as well, I'd be sending him I wouldn't be saying anything publicly. I'd send him an email just going, by the way, you need to stop talking yesterday or else, you will find out, you're doing a lot of fucking around. We'll get to the find out stage in a real hurry on this one. So, that I feel is, he's got to have a waiver. He's just got to, because otherwise
he's got
and
to.
I mean, this isn't like some junior guy who's not thinking about all of this and so forth. He's got to have a waiver. But then the question I ask is, okay, so he's got a waiver of solicitor-client privilege. That's a dangerous thing to have as a lawyer.
But didn't he do the smart thing by telling us right up front, I don't know anything about this case. I told him specifically not to tell me. So go ahead, depose me. Ask me all the questions you want. You want to hear about my extradition strategy? Okay, we can talk about that. He doesn't have anything to give them. And that's part of what I think, if this was planned, if this is, okay, wartime conciliary is setting himself up to be the public face for due process for Brian Kohberger, he did it brilliantly. That's exactly how you would do it.
I'd still depose him. Like, if I was on the other side, I would absolutely try to mine that for every detail that you could. And, I would just go to town and just be like, and the other thing is, an examination of the lawyer can be phrased in ways that will be very destructive, even without getting good answers. Did he tell you that he'd killed those 4 people? No, he didn't. Okay. So he didn't say that.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not a leading question.
He denied that he killed those 4 people.
Yeah, no, he didn't, because I told him not to talk. Okay. So he never denied it though.
Yeah.
No, he never denied it. All right. That becomes a problem. Like, if that gets played in front of a jury because they've waived solicitor-client privilege, I don't like that at all.
Well, that's not ideal.
And I mean, I would be objecting left, right, and center as new counsel and going like, this is not relevant. He doesn't know anything. This is extremely prejudicial. But like, it's tough when you're just like, are the questions extremely prejudicial? Because the other thing is like, did he ever deny killing those, these people? Objection. And then the jury gets filed out and they never see an answer to that.
Yeah.
It's like, what's the jury going to think? Oh, well, defense didn't want that question answered. Like, that's going to look real bad.
Yeah.
So, I mean, this is a double-edged sword.
It is. I mean, I can't deny this. This is, from my perspective, it's a high-risk, high-reward strategy, if it is. And I can already tell people in the chat are going to be like, no, this is not high reward. Okay, this guy is shooting himself in the foot so badly. But again, he is the only person, at least at the very beginning, he was the only person taking this position for Brian of, he's entitled to his presumption of innocence. Give him that. And, this is in context. I just, this is the part that I think is so frustrating, that there were something like, 40 press releases and public statements, interviews given by law enforcement on this case, right up to the point where he gets arrested and then we get slapped with a gag order. So he never never has, there's just been this massive flood of information from the law enforcement side, and now the target's on him, and he doesn't even get to answer. And so this lawyer is kind of the one guy they have that's a little bit of their counter to that. This is their opportunity to be able to try to work around that, to be able to present Brian Kohberger the way he wants to be presented, okay? Clearly communicating, I'm not so weirdo incel. I'm a smart guy. I can communicate with my lawyer. I'm intelligent. I'm normal,
Yeah, and I mean, the problem is that, like, intelligent and incel are not necessarily at odds. When we see a lot
Yes.
of these, like, I looked at there was a guy who killed a bunch of people with a van here in Toronto, or, not here in Toronto because that's halfway across the country, but, he's a fairly intelligent guy. He was able to, articulate himself well. He had a better education than most people who come before the criminal justice system. But the intelligence can be a bit of a downside too. People can get played in these interviews partially because they think they're smart.
Yeah,
and I did see something noting that, like, Kohberger had said he wanted to, like, he told the police he was going to give them a statement, and then he talked to a lawyer and he actually shut up. And I was like, thank God, right?
Yes.
Like, that is, and I don't mean that in the sense of, like, I want people to get away with things, but I just hate when you see people providing statements to the police, because I'm just like, why? And even when you don't have somebody who says, I did it, it's almost impossible not to say something that they can use against you. Just everything they can use against you. And even just your demeanor, right?
Absolutely. And the ways that they play it, that's part of the problem with is the gamesmanship that happens in these interrogations. Things like, okay, they have a process where they go through where you're supposed to tell the story multiple times, right? So you tell the story, you give them the basics, then they come back and go through it with you again and ask for more details. Great. Now you've provided them with more details. Now they tell you you've changed your story. There's all these ways that it can get twisted around and distorted into something it's not. Kind of like that clip that we saw of Jason LaBar saying it's a strong case.
Yep, exactly. And I see somebody saying the Toronto van killer was not intelligent. He was almost mentally handicapped. I can tell you, for the clients I deal with in terms of criminal law, the guy is basically a super genius. Because I literally have, I had a judge at one point who was talking about how my client would have been smart enough to know this and smart enough to know that. And I'm just sitting there, like, looking down at the guy's shoes, because this client who the judge was saying he should, he would have known this and he would have known that. I was, he has Velcro. And the reason why he's got Velcro shoes is that he's been like 30 years and he's never really been able to grasp the idea of how to tie shoes. And I'm going, okay, like, judge, you might have spotted this, but we're talking about a guy who can't tie his shoes.
Yeah.
So, and, like, how do you establish that? And then to a certain point, they just say, well, we're going to treat you like you're the ordinary person. It's like, well, that's not fair here either, right? Because he's clearly not. Kohberger is clearly, because he's got, a master's and is on his way to a PhD, he's clearly well above, like, and really, when I say well above, he's basically outside of the league of everything else that we, that we see. You could almost plot, like, the entire rest of, people in custody, and then Kohberger is going to be on this, like, outlying edge there. So, yeah, I do like that. I wish it didn't have to be the lawyer.
Yeah.
That's like, that's kind of my thoughts on that, is that I like that somebody is saying this stuff, but I kind of wish it wasn't the lawyer.
Yeah.
And I agree, like, the police will get out there right away and they'll do like 20 different press conferences because they probably know they're rushing it, like, that they're racing a gag order.
Mhm.
And, I don't like that the police can do that before defense has even gotten its footing. And then defense gets told to shut up, right?
Yeah.
So defense can't even like hire a spokesperson if your client somehow had the money to do that. And, and start putting out counter statements, because then the gag order hits and it's too late.
Yeah.
And the court never they never sort of consider like, hey, is this fair that we're going to silence one side when the other side's already been talking out of school?
Well, in fairness to the court, I mean, the defense lawyer stipulated to it, and Taylor stipulated to the gag order being entered. So it's not like it was a contested thing that she fought.
Yeah, but I mean, what you'd want to fight is you'd want to say, like, listen, we want a one-sided gag order to give us like 3 weeks to catch up and make follow-up statements. And I mean, the court's never going to give you that. I think it's fair that they could, but they're never going to, right? They're never going to. So at that point, you just be saying, hey, we're going to, it's either gag order or else the police are going to drown you in stuff.
Yeah.
And they're going to put all the, the worst details that they can into the public. And sometimes they're not even accurate about those details, right? When the police tell the media something, and then later you see what actually comes out at trial, and you're like, that's not the same thing, right?
Well, that's part of how this gag order has, from my perspective, really backfired, because all it's done is it's pushed the reporting into this realm of highly incredible anonymous sourcing. So there's all this information that gets put out that then has to be correct, like you pointed out with the FBI and the car search was an example that was originally sourced to an anonymous law enforcement source. We got the anonymous people that are talking about alleged connection between Brian Kohberger and the victims at the Mad Greek Cafe, owner of the Mad Greek Cafe, coming out and saying that did not happen. It's not correct. So it's almost worse, because at least if the police were able to speak freely, you would hope that the information they'd be providing would be accurate. But in the situation we have, it's just this drip, drip, drip to feed the hunger for, this kind of negative information about the guy. Like, people want to hear how bad he is and, all the mistakes he made and that type of thing. So pretty much anything that anybody puts out there that somebody is willing to print is going to get attention.
Well, and nobody's going to come forward and be like, yeah, no, I just want to go on record as saying that Kohberger's a great guy, and he was really, nice to me in our, in our classes or whatever else. Like, it's, you get that distortion effect of nobody wants to be the person sort of defending the guy who's accused of killing several people, because, then you get crap. And the other thing is that the media tends to treat sources differently. Police sources, when the media says, we'll give you a promise of anonymity, they're going to be anonymous, right? They're not going to burn that cop. But if you as a random citizen go up to them, they'll be like, an anonymous source who we've been able to determine is Joe Schmo of, whatever street, and here's his home address and where he works, said that Kohberger's a decent guy, and, he doesn't believe this. And suddenly the guy's fired and losing his job and all of that. And it's like, so yeah, I get frustrated. I mean, I haven't heard anything too fatal now, but the aspect of, I really don't like the dad having been there. I don't think we've heard that in the interview, but you mentioned that.
Yeah, he did. He said it in a little bit earlier. He says this came up in conversation when he was talking about the Indiana traffic stops. He said that came up in conversation with Brian and his father. Yeah. Made it sound an awful lot like they're having that conversation at the same time, which is really not something helpful to put out there, because, of course, if the father is present, that breaks the confidentiality with Brian as well. So, typically you don't have consultations with your client with other people present for that very reason.
Yep. No, and I mean, this is one that always, parents hate this, because they're like, they've come in, they've put down, however much, in some cases, thousands of dollars for their kids' defense. And the
Yes.
first thing I do is I kick the parents out of the interview room. And
Get
they're
out
like,
of the room. Yep.
they're like, but I need to hear this. I'm like, you need to anything but hear this.
Yep.
You're not even waiting in the lobby. You're going to get a coffee. I want, I want this to be a situation where it's, somebody else. If anybody asks, you could not possibly have heard anything because I kicked you out. Because otherwise, and I tell them, like, I'm also going to tell your kid not to talk to you about this. And I'm telling you that because I'm also telling you not to ask them about it.
Yeah.
Well, why? Because you can be witnesses. And, if you don't want to be a witness in this, and if you don't want to be testifying against your kid, and think of how your kid's going to feel about you, if you're the one who sends them to jail, then you need to quiet down here, or you need to, not do this. Anna is asking, is this the only interview going to be reacting to? We've got others, but we should hear more of this one.
Additional evidence that comes out about that sheath, one being it could be actual DNA on it. The state police executed a search warrant of Brian's blood when they were here in Pennsylvania, and we don't know if that's additional evidence that may come out if there's unidentified blood on the sheath. In addition to the sheath, the knife itself obviously not found, but we don't have the results of the autopsy, so we don't know if it's consistent with a straight edge weapon or not. Certainly that would change my feelings about the affidavit of probable cause too. You have mention of a van's footprint in the affidavit of probable cause. They don't match that with Brian. I would say that I reviewed I think it's at least one video of a previous encounter of the police at the home of the victims, where the individual who answers the door is actually in a pair of vans. I know I saw that, and I pointed that out last time I saw it, because that's what was interesting about that to me in the affidavit of probable cause. Now, again,
I kind of like that one.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, vans is not like a subtle, or it's not like, this is some custom shoe that's only available at like one particular tiny shoe store in Italy that's been run by a father-son pair, going back to like, the 20s. This is a major shoe company.
Literally everybody and your dog has vans.
Yeah. And when he's saying, hey, including one of the people at the house, it's like,
yes.
Oh, that changes things in a big way, right? That's, because now we're wondering whose are these, right? So that is, that's a fun one there. And I just got to tag something in the chat there. All right. The joys of the chat sometimes. So yeah, I mean, I kind of like that he's pointing that out. And I mean, this is something he can do without talking about my client said or this kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
I like this interview a lot more if he doesn't include any of the discussions about his client. And he's just like, so, I mean, I haven't, we didn't talk about it. I don't know about the, anything other than what you see. But when I look at the case, I see a bunch of problems. And you know what? Mm-hmm. We may find more problems as the evidence comes out. But, yeah, it's I like this part where he's poking holes in it.
Yeah.
I mean, this is good, and this I'd agree with you on the sort of wartime consigliere aspect, but I don't like when he's introducing the other, the discussions with his client. I don't even see the value of it.
Yeah, I mean, I sympathize with your position because it's so ingrained in us as lawyers to shut up, don't do these things, don't say these things, don't talk about it. And obviously that's very important. I don't know about you. I never did any like super high profile cases or anything like that, but you get a case once in a while that's in the local news or whatever. And the press wants to talk to you. And I have a, universal no comment policy. You want to hear what I have to say, come to court and watch me sit there. That's my comfort zone. And I think it's the comfort zone for most lawyers, but that doesn't fit in a situation like this where there is just such a massive media component to it. And it reminds me so much of, Adam Waldman and what, he was doing, his role with Johnny Depp. Same kind of thing, I think you can say. That's a very high risk, high reward strategy. Obviously, it cost Johnny, to engage in that strategy. But at the same time, if Adam Waldman hadn't done those things, we wouldn't have gotten those early views of the audios. The audios are really what changed the perception of that case around, when people could hear her in her own voice abusing Johnny Depp on tape for their listening pleasure.
Absolutely.
That's because of Adam working with the press, working the press side of management for his clients. So I appreciate the need for it. I just have never found myself in a context where that would be required. And I'm willing to bet this public defender has probably never been in that situation before either.
I mean, Waldman, his deposition was not great in trial. And, as noted,
I'm shocked that they were allowed to play that. I'm honestly shocked that they were allowed to play just over and over and over again of invoking the right to counsel. That's so prejudicial and improper. I cannot believe that Judge Ascarati let them do that.
I was actually quite surprised at that as well. But I think that might have been part of an agreement that if they did, that the whole Waldman deposition would go in, because Waldman was savvy in that deposition. The thing I really liked is when they started asking him things like, well, why'd you file a police report? He's like, well, because I believed that they'd perjured themselves and, conspired and so forth. And I was like, damn, that is not the answer that they wanted in that deposition. I would have chewed my arm off as Bredehoft not to get that in. I would have been telling, and ultimately it was a $2 million shift, but I would have been telling, Amber, like, listen, we do not want to tender this deposition. We want to fight this, or at least we don't want to let that part in. Like, this went terribly badly. Yeah. So, the Waldman thing cuts both ways. It is tough. This one may cut both ways, but I really don't want to see this guy deposed. Like, I really don't want to see this guy, ending up having to talk about all of his, relationship, his discussions with his client. Yeah. And, and possibly things like demeanor, right? Like, oh, so this guy seemed fairly emotionless to you. Do you think that a jury might latch on to that? He's trying to say, oh, he wasn't too freaked out or whatever, but the jury might hear this guy is a psychopath. And, now we're into, there's all sorts of things. And the jury, I think, is going to put inordinate weight on anything. Like, if this guy ends up forced to testify, the jury's going to put ridiculous weight on anything he says. Like, they're just going to, so anything where he gets, that might be at all damaging. And he's going to be trying his best to be like, I don't know squat about squat, but, jury's gonna be just laser focused on it, I feel. So I'm concerned. I would have wanted to.
Yeah. It's a risk. I think there's hope for, even if it went badly in a situation like that, there's so much room to rehabilitate him. Just
yeah.
The other thing, allowing those characterizations to stand.
The other thing I would probably be doing if I was him is just letting the I don't know, the prosecution might also think, like, are we going to be walking into a trap if we put this guy on the stand? Because let's say they get him up there and he says, like, my belief is that Mr. Kohberger's innocent. Yeah. And they're going to be like, oh, that's because you're defense counsel. He's like, no, I'm not anymore, and I'm under oath, right? I have to just straight up tell you what I think. So, like, most of my clients are guilty, but, like, Kohberger's innocent. At that point, they're like, that's something the prosecution does not want to have anyone hear. And, that the defense could never introduce that, right? The defense could never do that.
No.
But the prosecution could F up and do
the
that.
state can ask the wrong question and elicit something like that. And he, like he's pointed out with this take on the vans, this guy is reasonably quick on his feet. He's not going to be an easy mark as a witness. You're going to approach him off the bat as a dangerous witness because he's not ignorant about you and your tricks and this process and how it all works. I would guarantee he's probably, cross-examined a lot more people than most of the lawyers, that we talk to on a daily basis.
I mean, trying to cross-examine this or trying to, get good information out of this guy for the prosecution would be a little bit like playing with old dynamite in the sense of maybe it works out, maybe it blows up in your face and everything goes sideways. And I mean, if they ask a stupid question and end up asking the court, like, we need a mistrial because this question we asked got the lawyer to say something that was wildly inappropriate. Good luck with that, right? What was your impression of his demeanor? Did he seem like he was, agitated or calm? He seemed fairly confident that he'd be acquitted because, it's like...
Yeah. Exactly. He's got all this time to work those kinds of things out in his mind,
Yeah, well, and if they subpoena him, he's going to be sitting there just thinking, like, how can I tank them if they come after me? Because, I mean, I do think he's trying to act in his client's interest, right?
Yeah.
Because there have been a lot of people saying, like, this is just for PR and so forth. If he was just looking for PR, he could say much worse stuff. Like, if he wanted to be famous, he could go in there and be like, well, I've got this waiver of privilege. So, my first feeling my first feeling when I saw this guy is that he was, a stone cold killer. Boom. He'd be on every, thing. He'd probably get like he'd get a deal with NBC. I mean, his legal career would be done, but he'd get a deal with, to do commentary and whatever else, real fast. He's not doing that. And I mean, that makes me happy because I was worried when I heard that he gave this interview because it could have been way worse.
Yes.
All right.
It could come back that Brian has a pair of hands that could possibly match that. Talk about the vehicle. The vehicle's interesting because, I mean, there is no direct evidence that it's Brian's vehicle. They used the cell phone pings, tower pings, to link the vehicle to its whereabouts the night close to the home. They used that to track it, allegedly. But there's really no evidence that it's still Brian's vehicle. You have the license plate on the back, not on the front. I understand that, but I'm sure it's still not the only white Hyundai Elantra 2011 to 2016 that would match that description in the area. And you have no one that places Brian behind the wheel of the vehicle.
I would have been a little more tricksy in answer it or in that aspect. And just say, like, it's not the only white Elantra with a one license plate, but he gets real specific, and that answer, like that little bit there, started to sound a little bit like a stretch. That's just kind of my feeling on that one.
Yeah, he might have reached for that one a little bit.
Yeah,
but I do, again, I mean, I appreciate what he's doing here from the educational side of things. Like, hey, guys, did you know that pings can be total junk? Maybe you didn't know that. You've read the probable cause affidavit. Here I am, the one person out there who's going to tell you, by the way, this stuff is junk.
Well, and also, I mean, it's perfectly reasonable to say things like, how many Elantras did Hyundai sell in these years?
Mm-hmm.
Probably most, like, this is still pretty recent. So I'm thinking most of these are probably still on the road. So, we've narrowed it down to how many million vehicles?
Yeah.
Cool, right?
Yeah.
So somebody's saying, I think Brian has a camera in his car, not a cameraman, unless he's sitting next to him. It looks to me like they've got a camera set up poking through his window, but I don't know for certain.
That is what it looks like to me, but yeah, who knows?
So again, another hold in regards to that, because he can't verify that he's the one driving the vehicle.
But they don't have to put all of that in the probable cause, though, right? I mean, could they know that?
No, absolutely not. This is just holes that I got from the affidavit of probable cause that the prosecution could clearly clear up, right? And really, you anticipate it as defense counsel that they're going to have additional evidence to clear this up. The one that's going to be difficult is the cell phone tower pings that I found to clear up, because Brian's phone was off from approximately, I think it's 2:30 to 4:30 or 4:45. I don't know the exact times. And cell phone tower pings is, we like to call it as defense counsel, junk science, not exact science. The cell phone tower ping is that when you send a signal out, it pings off of a tower. When it hits that tower, it creates a radius as to where you could be placed around that tower. Now, this was approximately, as the crow flies, 8 miles away, I believe. And cell phone tower ping information usually is a 20-mile radius. That's how the expert is going to testify. The only way to get around that is if there's GPS evidence. Now, so when he turned his phone on, or right before he turned it off, you're going to have GPS evidence up until the point, likely, of that in a cell phone dump. And then you're going to have GPS location the second it gets turned back on. That's not in the affidavit of probable cause. It's certainly through the 60,000 plus pages that'll be generated from a forensic review of his cell phone. So certainly it's more evidence that you're going to be looking at.
Yeah, and I mean, when I was pointing this out when I was going through the affidavit, like, they say it's consistent with.
Mm-hmm.
Well, great. If you're drawing like 20-mile circles on a map, lots of things are going to be consistent with.
Yeah, use this very ambiguous language that it utilized cell tower resources. That tells you absolutely nothing about, did this ping on one tower, did this ping on multiple towers? Were you able to triangulate this data? How precise of a location were you able to nail this down to? If all you can do is place him, not exclude him from this moving 20-mile radius, that is not particularly helpful.
Yeah, and I mean, there could be all sorts of places he could be. Like, maybe he went to a nightclub and had a few drinks, and I mean, we've all been to places that just have terrible cell reception. He's just hanging out at a place that happens to have, a crappy concrete roof. So, I mean, I don't know. It's
well, and I wish he hadn't conceded that point too, because that was one of these messages that came out in the reporting on the probable cause affidavit. That I'm like, no, that is not right. They did not prove that he turned off his phone. They proved his phone didn't connect during that time. It does not mean he turned it off. He could have been out of service. He could have, there could have been an outage in the area. There are other explanations besides he turned off the phone. That's what the police said, because they want you to think it's the one that makes him look guilty. But that's not the only possible explanation.
The other thing that I always just am kind of startled at is, like, does nobody actually use security on their electronic devices?
I have a code. I have a passcode. It's probably terrible.
I mean, if you've got a 4-digit code, they're getting into your phone.
Yes.
But, like, I've got a code that's long enough that I just can't get into my phone while I'm driving, and that's how I like it.
Yeah.
But that also means that it's going to be a lot harder for them to sit there and brute force. So if they're like, hey, we want to get through your phone, it's like, best of luck, guys. Let me know how that goes. That I feel like is the way to go. And on my computer, I've got encryption, and my encryption is also like not, it's not like a 6-character password. It's not like an 8-character password. It's more than 30. So, good luck brute forcing it. And I don't know how much more, because it's stupid long. But yeah, if it's a numerical code, they will get into it. But I mean, why don't people set up proper passwords? And the other thing is, like, even if you're innocent, you don't want them digging through your phone for all sorts of reasons.
Yes.
One, most people don't think about just how intrusive digging through people's phones is.
Mm-hmm.
And I see Rob here in the chat. For example, Andrea's phone computer is pinging off a tower that's right at that 8-mile radius range.
I don't think my phone is pinging off of much of anything right now, going by my signal.
And somebody's saying if it's Windows 10, it's actually pretty easy to reset that password. It is not. It is drive encryption. So good luck resetting that, because it's drive encryption. Because, yeah, you got to, but I've had people who were ultimately cleared who had questions like, does that mean that they saw those pictures that I took? It's like, yep. They're like, including the ones of, and I'm like, yep, they sent me those too. Mm-hmm. They're like, oh, like, yeah, just so you know, I have seen way more of you than you would like. Yeah, and the clients are, yeah, and I'm just like, it is what it is. And I mean, I've had clients' wives call me up and be like, what do you mean you saw my pictures? And I'm like, sorry, like, I'm just trying to run the case, and when I get sent a dump with a guy's phone, it includes everything. And you know, like, I can tell you, I see that and I'm like, not relevant to the case, move on. I can't say for certain about like the cops or everyone else who saw those things, because yeah, it's it just always baffles me that, they're like, yeah, we got the guy's browser history. I'm like, especially with this guy supposedly, being this criminal mastermind. Everyone's describing him as like he had this grand plan. I'm like, if this is his grand master plan and it doesn't include a password on his freaking phone.
Yeah.
Like,
I know. I don't see grand master plan in any of this, honestly. I mean, obviously we don't know. We know nothing about motive and all that, but yeah, just too many basic things.
Like, people want to play this like it's this guy is trying to commit the perfect crime. I'm like,
have somebody else drive you, drop you off downtown, and walk. Just for an example, leave your phone at home. These are just small suggestions,
Yep. I mean, it's baffling. It's, hey, where was the guy's phone? It was at home doing what? Why? Well, because I was sitting at home, watching TV. Like, great. That's not an alibi, because watching TV, but at least it's, consistent.
My phone I left it home to charge.
Yeah. Why was your phone off during this time? It powered down. Like,
yeah.
So, all right. So let's sort of carry on here.
Again, there's a lot of things. It's like I said, it's little. I know I'm saying it contradictory, that it's a strong circumstantial, but there's holes. I anticipate those holes to grow smaller when the prosecution puts their entire case on it and collects all their evidence. But maybe not. I don't know. But there are certainly holes in the case, and the affidavit of probable cause is just a start. We're in the infancy of the case, and I really do pretty much bank on the Commonwealth, well, I say Commonwealth because it's Pennsylvania, but the prosecution coming up with more evidence, obviously.
The statement that you released from Kohberger, where he, said that he was innocent, essentially, did you write the statement with him? I don't know if you can share how that statement came about.
The statement came about Friday night when I talked to him. I to understand, on Friday,
don't like this.
We were closed. We had a half day, so I knew I wanted to plan out sort of the attack of what I wanted to get done. What I know I needed to have get done because of the immediate exposure I anticipated with the case. I didn't expect it to be like this. I didn't expect it to be more. I've been told by the AOPC, which is Court Administration, that really more calls than were on Cosby. They were calling about this. So I sort of got a heads up of what to expect. So I sat down in my office at 12 noon on Friday, and I wanted to plan this out as to what I wanted to get done. Two things that I felt most important is making contact with the Idaho Public Defense Commission, obviously talking to Brian as soon as possible, getting a statement out. based upon my conversation with Brian, obviously, talking to the family and getting potentially another statement out. And really, from noon to approximately 4:30, I took time to search relevant law, Idaho law, in reference, like, what Brian would expect upon extradition and returning back. So then I went out to the jail at 5 o'clock. I know there was a lot of people, a lot of news media outlet at the jail at that time, but I knew it was dark out, so I could essentially sneak in under the cover of dark and be able to talk to him without anyone knowing that I was actually there. And I spoke to him for about an hour. I let him know about the statement, that I wanted to get a statement out there because with all of the news media, I knew there was going to obviously be issues as far as him receiving potentially a fair trial. People jumping to conclusions, automatically you worry about the presumption of innocence and the integrity of the criminal justice system. So I said, Brian, is it okay if we get a statement out? And that's when he brought up the eager to be exonerated language. And obviously that was included in the statement. So
yeah, I don't like the discussions with the, that's a question that I just would have said, listen, I can't discuss what my client and I talked about. So yeah, I don't want to open a door to any sort of review of my solicitor client discussions. That's kind of my feel on that one.
Yeah. I think you don't want to, but my impression here is that they have already accepted that as the inevitable, part of this process. I thought it's very telling that he specifically mentioned one of the things he did is talk to the Idaho Public Defense Commission. That to me, yes, he could just be talking about logistics, and is he going to get an attorney, and do you know who the attorney is going to be, and can I get that person's contact information, and so on and so forth.
I feel like there's more to it here. This guy
you
seems
have to
like
assume there's more to it. Yeah, there's coordination going on.
I mean, I kind of expected that I was going to go into this thinking that this guy was a complete idiot. I don't like all of the strategic decisions that he's making, but I can at least acknowledge that they seem to be strategic decisions. Mm-hmm. And I mean, some of the stuff he's doing, I'm like, this is absolutely fantastic, and this is above and because I mean, as the public defender, what he gets sort of covered for is do stuff in court, meet with client, and none of the media stuff, right? Like, yeah. That's not normally included as part of the package. Normally, if you want somebody to do the, the media stuff, you've got to actually, have the budget for a, for a team to do that. So, yeah. Rob is saying, for example, if you ever texted your friend a joke, what if I took that punchline and eliminated all the other conversation leading up to it and then read it out loud in a different tone and cadence? Yep.
Better yet, give somebody who spent the last 40 years reading lines for a living, have them read it out loud. See how that works.
Yeah. Because I can guarantee you when the prosecution reads you that line, they're going to put their own, they're going to put the cadence on it that they want.
Yes.
And there's a lot that can be made to be set to sound really bad. We all remember the infamous line of, for example, I have other uses for your throat.
Yes.
I mean, we all know what activity. We all know what activity they're referring to there. But the lawyers get to pretend like they're dumb and they've never, heard of certain activities. And so, yeah, that gets played over and over. And, you get Rottenborn delivering that in his particular sort of style of delivery. And it sounds bad when he says it.
I'm just reading Rob's statement right here, and I'm imagining this in the Bain voice. You could make this extremely threatening.
Yeah.
What if?
Just as a
Bet
different.
You wouldn't want to see that happen, but you might pay a lot to keep that from happening.
Yeah, I mean, let's say you walk into a shop and you say, "Hey, you've got a lot of stuff packed in here. Aren't you worried about a fire?" Right? aren't you worried that you don't have enough sprinklers if there was a fire here?
Yeah.
You might be asking that in that kind of tone, like, hey, you got your fire exit blocked and so forth. But you present that in the wrong, in a different, like, the heavy Italian mobster accent. And suddenly you're, it sounds like you're threatening to burn the place down.
Yeah.
It sounds like you're there for asking for insurance money. Yeah, and somebody in the chat has a really good note there. Mr. Rottenborn.
Yes.
You know how that'll appear in the transcript? That particular moment of Mr. Rotten, pause, born? That'll just appear as Mr. Rottenborn.
Yeah.
It won't capture.
Unless the court reporter really loves Johnny, and then she might get that pause in there.
I feel like leaving the pause out probably is the bigger favor to Johnny on that one. Because but yeah, just the change in tone and so forth can be huge.
Yeah.
I've had so many people say, well, that was a joke. When I said it to the cop, I was joking about that, because you have things like, somebody says, oh yeah, sure, I was out breaking into places all night, right? And they might have been saying it in a sarcastic voice, and the cop writes it down as, he acknowledged he was committing break and enters,
Yeah.
But even if he quotes you directly, it's still going to sound real bad. You told them, and I quote, yes, I was out breaking into places all night. Is that not what you said to the officer?
Yes.
Well, yes, but, and that sounds terrible, right?
Yes, no,
So,
as very much a connoisseur and devotee of sarcasm, I nevertheless must advise everybody universally, do not employ it with police. It does not go over well.
yeah, and I mean, it's often malicious, right? From the sense of the police are trying to frame your language the same way anyone else is. They're not cutting you a break. They're not your friends.
Mhm.
And so even if they're laughing with you, don't.
They're like, make sure you got that right.
Yeah.
Can you get him to say it again?
Yeah, we're going to get this on recording, but then we're going to lose the tape later. It's, yeah, this is, oh yeah, and here's the other one. I want a lawyer dog. You heard about that case?
I have not.
This, and I haven't read the actual case. I want to find the actual case, but I've seen it reported in a number of places. Guy says to the cops, yo, I want a lawyer, dog. And the judge ruled that was not an invocation of counsel, because what is a lawyer dog?
Oh, Lord.
Like, just completely ignoring
Wow.
the very clear slangy expression there of, calling the cop dog.
That's
And I'm just
funny.
like,
wow.
yeah, but that's the basis for this guy's statement going in, and, his rights getting trampled is, yeah. Yeah, and in terms of search history, well, I just looked up whether heroin is vegan, so now that's on my permanent record.
What did you find?
I suspect it is vegan, but I don't know for certain.
I would suspect, but I don't know enough about the processing.
Yeah, I mean, I can't think of what meat-based things they would use for it, but
the only thing I can think of is like sometimes the egg white, that's used for clarification of different things, like the beers and wines end up not being vegan. There could be something like that with heroin. I don't know.
Apparently, it is vegan.
It is vegan.
And I see
the things we need to know.
Use a VPN, people. VPN is half the battle, because a VPN stops your internet provider from providing all these details to the police, but it also doesn't stop the police from getting your computer and just looking on your computer for your search history. And I mean, I play role-playing games, so sometimes I've had to Google things like, would acid dissolve a body? And I'm like, this is because I'm working on an acid trap for a Dungeons and Dragons sort of campaign, but that would look real bad potentially. So yeah. Where the poppies are heroin is not vegan if it's smuggled inside animals. But yeah, there's a lot of people talking about the sheath not being vegan and Kohberger apparently being vegan. I don't know how much a jury's going to put on that, right?
Yeah. And we don't know, why is vegan? What way is he vegan? Is he a health freak? Or is he an animal rights activist? I mean, there's different motivations for that as well.
Yeah, it's tough to say. And I mean, they're probably just going to be like, a knife is a knife, right? So, and I feel like you're in a bad place if you're arguing like, I wouldn't do this because of my personal beliefs. Because, well,
that's verifiable, isn't it?
Yeah.
Easy to corroborate that one.
Well, and then it lets them start bringing in all sorts of evidence as to how vegan you are.
Yes,
so it'll
exactly.
be everyone who says, that they saw you order a latte at some point. And then you have to argue every single latte anyone's ever seen you drink. Because, I mean, one of the things is you and I both know that one of the things that binds the prosecution sometimes is the budget, right? They might like to do a lot of investigation, but often there just isn't the money for it because there's only so much they're going to spend on, even like a gangland shooting. And a shooting opens all sorts of money, openings, but it's not the same as like 4 college kids who are dead.
Yes.
Every purse string has been opened. And so they're going to have the resources to like talk to everybody who's ever met Brian Kohberger to ask him if he's ever had a latte.
Yeah.
And they're going to get somebody who's like, yeah, I served him at a Starbucks and he didn't say he wanted, non-milk, whatever. I don't drink coffee. So I'm, but I don't know what the options are there, but so I see people saying oat milk. They'll get somebody who said, yeah, I don't remember him asking for oat milk. Do you really think the barista actually remembers that?
Yeah, exactly.
So it's that's all frustrating. Say, do y'all think the defense will bring up the fact that Steve Gosney still hasn't found his missing K-bar? I think the defense may bring up all sorts of things, but I can't. It's too early to say what the defense strategy is going to be because we haven't actually seen what the prosecution strategy is going to be.
Yeah.
And I mean, if this is all the prosecution has, the defense strategy might be, you haven't proved it.
Yeah, sit back and blink at it. Absolutely.
Okay, so you've got this down to a 20-mile radius. It's possible he could have been at this, is it possible he just went to this bar that's within the radius? Mm-hmm. He could have been sitting there having drinks, right? Yeah, but I mean, we don't think so. But you can't say he didn't. You can't say that's not what's going on. There's all sorts of places in these 20 miles where he could have been, right?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, but, and you don't know, you don't know where the, where this knife sheath came from, do you? No, well, but we don't. You don't know if they've ever met before, do you? Well, no, we don't because, they're dead. So they can't say if they've ever, maybe they've even had Kohberger over to their house before. We don't know any of this stuff.
Yeah. No, it's very true.
I mean, maybe the knife sheath was them trying to grab a weapon to defend themselves against some other assailant. And they've got the knife sheath because they, got it from we just don't know any of this stuff.
Yeah.
And all of this stuff really can change the equation in a huge way. We don't know. So, yeah, we just don't know. And I see somebody saying that's a stretch. We don't know. We just have no clue. So, all right, more of the car.
That was him who wanted to put that in.
The eager to be exonerated was the language he used. We put it in the statement. But obviously, when I talked to him about the eager to be exonerated, to me, when we talked about it, it was more or less he was asserting innocence, but that's the language he used.
Do you think that Kohberger can get a fair trial here in Moscow, Idaho?
There is no way he can get a fair trial in Moscow, Idaho. I don't know if he can get a fair trial in Idaho.
Just because of the attention, you think, or?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, due to all the media news outlets, the attention it has gotten. I mean, you're talking about an international case now, and really a social media is also an issue here. I mean, this is really one of the first cases. I mean, you had the Petito, I think Petito is correct.
Petito, yeah, Gabby Petito.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know that he can get a fair trial on planet Earth.
Yeah.
I mean, what they're going to do is they're going
Yeah.
to say this is the best jury we can assemble in the circumstances, and yeah.
Yeah, I think if they're going to have a realistic prospect of moving this thing, which incidentally, I'm not even entirely sure they're going to want to do, but if they're going to do that, it's going to depend, I think, on either too many connections with people who are going to be witnesses in the case, because it's a
Yep.
small town, you know, it doesn't take too many steps before, you know, one of the cops who's the investigator, or it's going to be because the town was terrorized, you know, while the investigation was ongoing before they had identified him. And so, you know, people are going to have a different response in Moscow than anywhere else. Other than that, though, I mean, that's the problem. The press stuff is universal. You're not going to get away from that by taking the trial to Boise. So that's not a good basis for moving it, in my opinion.
We're talking about this, you know, and I'm here in Edmonton, Alberta. We've got somebody noting I'm in Brazil, right? But I don't think you want it in this particular town because of that whole, like, there was that whole fear and uprising in the town where people were like, is there a serial killer wandering around? Who's next? Like that kind of discussion. And I feel like that makes it very difficult to have a fair trial.
I think that's right, but I think there's also, you know, this has been a burden on the community, not just because of the fear, but the whole aftermath of having to deal with the media, having to deal with the sleuths and the speculation and the you know, crime tourism and
the
all
psychics.
of that. The psychics, the tarot readers. And I feel like there could very well be sort of a sense of almost duty, like almost responsibility, kind of to see it through. Like, no, this is ours. We are the ones that have been affected by this. We don't want, you know, some jury in Boise to be looking at this case and telling us, you know, how they think it should be handled. This happened to us. We're the ones who are going to make that call. I could see it.
And I feel like that's all the more reason to move it, though. Like, just cynically speaking, I mean, you don't want a juror saying, like, I'm defending my hometown as they go into the, you know, into the jury box there. So, yeah, that's, yeah. And I see people are shocked that the TikTok tarot reader was wrong.
Yeah.
I think that defamation suit's going to be real interesting. Because, I mean, if I was their lawyer, I'd probably be arguing nobody's actually going to take me seriously on this, right?
Yeah. But the problem is, it sounds like they have a pretty good record of, you know, a lot of harassment that she got as a result of that. I mean, if they can substantiate that and show that even if people didn't necessarily believe it, nevertheless, at least they acted on it, you know, in a way that was detrimental. I don't know, it could be enough to get them over the hurdle.
Yeah, I mean, this is why it's a really bad idea for people in the chat to sort of armchair sleuth. The rates on armchair sleuthing tend to be real bad because keep in mind, the police don't, like, they've got information they're not revealing to the public. And sometimes the police will actively let the public be wrong about things.
Yes.
Like, you know, we don't know that these people were actually stabbed or with what. You know, for certain, like, we know that they sustained some sort of sharp force injury, but, like, what if it turns out it's, you know, a sword or, you know, a railroad spike? You know, who knows, right?
Yeah.
So,
yeah. But even little things like that, like you're saying, serrated blade, you know, versus straight edge blade. double-sided blade versus single-edged blade. These things can make a difference.
Yep. And so I think they've got to move that on. And, I think that this one should be heard elsewhere, but we'll see. I mean, I think the counter argument is going to be, listen, it's just as bad anywhere, so it might as well be heard here where it happened, and, give the, have it as a jury of peers and, members of the community.
Well, one of the points that I've made on this is that, there's kind of this assumption that, oh, well, if it gets moved, it's going to get moved to Boise. I don't see that as given at all. There's no guarantee about where this thing lands. And so the problem is you have what I would consider superficially a relatively defense-friendly jurisdiction in Moscow, Idaho. You've got universities in the town. You're going to trend, a little bit more liberal, for lack of a better way to put it, meaning in the conservative type, classic sense of being liberal. But also this particular judge, I did a video about the judge's record, and he's not been at all afraid to make defense-friendly rulings. And that is no guarantee in this part of the country. Okay, so you have a real out of the frying pan into the fire risk here, that you already have a pretty good spot in terms of just,
yeah, it could get so much worse
of getting a fair shake, and it could get a lot worse if you be careful what you wish for sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's see here.
The Gabitino case, I mean, that had something like this, but I mean, my understanding about this case specific, I mean, this has blown up on social media to a point where most people ages of 18 to 25 have actually posted comments on it. So I'm not on social media. I don't believe in social media. People are too free to express their really views without repercussions, to say.
Okay, dude.
And in this case, a lot of people have already expressed either guilt or innocence, and really neither helps either the prosecution or defense, because, I mean, listen, at the end of things here, I want to make this very clear and important, and the family would really make this clear and important. Listen, there's 4 families suffering from loss, right? I mean, they will never get their loved ones back, and they want justice, okay? But we want to make sure, everyone wants to make sure that the right guy is the one that they have at trial, and the one who ultimately is convicted. Whether that ends up being Brian or not, I can't say. The evidence will ultimately come out at trial. But the important thing is that he's presumed innocent until proven otherwise.
And just my last question, there's the hearing tomorrow morning, the status hearing, where they'll talk about the possibility of a preliminary hearing. It's my understanding the defense can waive that. Do you think there should be a preliminary hearing? I mean, if this was your case now, is that in his best interest?
Well, I mean, my understanding is it is going to be a status hearing. I had watched the initial arraignment, and I know that his attorney Taylor had requested for a status hearing, but I believe the judge listed it for a preliminary hearing, so I was a little bit confused also, but I think it's been verified that it is just the status hearing tomorrow. And I absolutely anticipate there to be a very long preliminary hearing at some point, whether that happens tomorrow or in the future. I would anticipate a preliminary hearing based upon the affidavit of probable cause. Okay. And if I circle back just a little bit, the one thing that I didn't address was the shaky ID by DM in the affidavit of probable cause. I would without doubt say that is at best a shaky ID that any defense counsel is going to have a field day with on cross-examination.
What do you mean by shaky ID?
Well, first of all, it's not an ID of Brian Kohberger. It's an ID of a person who has an athletic, non-muscular build, approximately 5'10", with bushy eyebrows,
right, wearing
a mask. It's dark, obviously, likely. I'm assuming it's dark. We won't know until DM actually testifies. But really, when you think about it, that's the only direct evidence, allegedly, putting Brian at the scene, if it's Brian who's ID'd. So certainly, I can't say that it's a direct evidentiary link to Brian, and I certainly think once examination occurs of DM, there's going to be real issues with even using her testimony.
Yeah,
Interesting.
I think that her testimony.
Well, thank you.
If they haven't done a lineup.
Yeah. No, I don't think that they're going to rely heavily, if at all, on her testimony.
Yeah,
I mean, part of the problem with it, just taking all of the things that we've already
really
talked
helpful.
about aside, they don't know this is the murderer. Yeah, okay, maybe it was going by the circumstances, but we've already heard so much about this being a party house, this being a place where everybody, apparently had the code for the door, people would come and go. There's already, a DoorDash guy coming and going. I mean, this is not a place with, the minimal traffic of, the residents you have when you're more in my kind of age group,
I mean,
So-
if I was just looking for, I want to kill somebody, and this, I'm planning the perfect crime, this is not where I'd go.
Yeah.
So, like the whole, this guy's a criminology student and wants to plan the perfect crime makes no sense to me.
No, I agree. There's very little about this that reads perfect crime to me.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't even read that that's what the guy was trying to do. It's just, if Kohberger's the guy, this reads much more like Stalker than perfect criminal from that.
Yeah.
But, I mean, people have just latched onto his criminology degree, and I feel like that is in error. I mean, I thought this was going to be worse. There's parts of it that I'm just like, no, don't. But it's not so much what he said. It's just the fact of him talking about it that I don't like.
Yeah.
Um,
And I get that. It's there's a resistance to it. But I'm glad that you have come with an open mind to give him his fair hearing and let's just judge him on the merits of what he's had to say.
That's the thing is, you gotta sort of look at these things and see what they're doing. I mean, and I see people saying that this is the least bad one. And I don't know. It's tough because he's given a bunch of these, and it's hard to know which ones, to sort of check out here. I'm just trying to see here. Is there one you'd recommend having a look at? Because there's several of them.
There are several. Maybe the GMA one.
The which one?
Is it the GMA?
I don't know if I have that one.
Let me check.
I'm not coming up with. Good Morning America. Yeah. It's not coming up if I do a search for Good Morning America and Labar.
I'm probably misremembering.
Was it
Well, just put one of them up, or we can ask the chat. Chat, which one should we look at? I see somebody in the chat saying Today Show.
Yeah, that one I've got. Let me just see here. Gotta find that. Is that this one?
Barr is the public defender representing Brian Kohberger at today's hearing. He has visited his client 4 times since his arrest. Mr. Labar, good morning to you. You have a busy day ahead of you. First of all, just quickly, what do you expect to happen today at the hearing?
I expect Brian to be brought into courtroom 1, and he's likely to sign the extradition paperwork.
And you've visited with him several times. You've made a point to say you have not talked to him or tried to talk to him about the substance of the charges against him. What has his demeanor been like? What has his mood? What have you observed from those multiple interactions in the last few days?
He's being very calm. He's very aware. He understands the proceedings. I did discuss with him what to expect in the upcoming days on his transport, as well as what to expect when he actually returns to Idaho and is likely in front of a magistrate or a judge there.
I recognize you're being careful because you're handling this procedural matter. You're not the person who will be defending him at trial, presumably. But has he reacted to the charges at all? One can imagine being accused of something like this and saying, wait, where did this come from? Why are they coming after me? Have you seen any kind of that behavior from him?
It is a little out of character. He said, I mean, this is not him. He believes he's going to be exonerated. That's what he believes. Those were his words. So he's really been very easy to talk to, actually. And he's in a calm demeanor, like I stated.
What about his family? The mother and father, the sister, they put out a statement. What do they say about the charges against him and what they make of this in terms of the person that they know?
They don't believe it to be Brian. They can't believe this. They're obviously shocked. This is certainly completely out of character, the allegations, and really they're just trying to be supportive with the understanding these four families have suffered loss, so that they're sympathetic towards that, and that's why it should remain really private. And they don't want to try this case in the court of public opinion. And without knowing the facts and evidence,
but that is what you're trying to do.
They don't really want to comment on things.
His father drove him from Washington State at the holidays back to Pennsylvania. I understand that was a plan that had been in the works for some time. They were also stopped by police a couple of times on the way, I think, for minor traffic violations. Do you believe that to be part of this larger investigation, or is that just a random coincidence?
I believe it to be a random coincidence. I don't disbelieve that Brian and Michael Kohberger would have made that story up. There's no reason. They have been fully cooperative when they did speak with police and authorities. I know there's some reports that there's no actual evidence that they were stopped in Indiana, but Mr. Kohberger, Michael, had definitely said that they were stopped twice in Indiana back to back.
All right, Jason Labar, I know it's a busy day before you. Thank you for being with us this morning. Appreciate it.
I mean, that was short. I don't like him talking about his demeanor, and I would not be going on about how he's, those were his words. He's looking forward to being exonerated. It's like, I feel like that is the kind of thing where the media can nitpick. He didn't say he was innocent. He said he looks forward to being exonerated.
I suppose that's true, but at the same time, they're gonna nitpick anything. If he says he's innocent, I'm sure that they would find a way, to have a problem with that. Oh, that means you hate the grieving families. It's just there's always going to be some way to attack him.
That is true. I mean, it's not that bad. My main concern on this one is not so much like he tanked the case. It's that he opened a door that I don't think should be open.
Yeah.
And
I agree with you. I think the big negative downside to this is the potential he's made to make himself a witness. And that's
and
I wouldn't want to do that.
I feel like he could have accomplished all of his goals without doing that.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of my thought on that one, is that all of the stuff about like, hey, this is a weak case. I feel like he could have done that elsewhere.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. This kind of makes me think that we need something like, the public defender's office in each state should maybe just have a media person whose job it is to come out and hey, I have no connection with this case, but let's talk about the presumption of innocence. And, because the police have that kind of person. They've got, they've got all of those sorts of details there. So,
we do have some people like that, not with in my state anyway, with centralized defense, because we only have state centralized defense at the appeal level. At the trial level, it's just county by county. But we do have, defender organizations, prosecutor organizations, law enforcement organizations. And so it's not unheard of for them to come out and make comments like that.
Yeah, I mean, how many times have you heard the police union say something?
Oh, absolutely.
And not only just for, what do you call it? Not only just when it's, in somebody's being attacked, but it's also like they'll put it up for what do you call it? When like when a police officer's shot somebody, they'll weigh in and try to push their finger on the dial as to what that looks like. And there's also this one, News Nation. So we'll have to see. This one I've heard might be worse, but I don't know.
The man and in the context of the situation?
The man is an intelligent man, Brian. He was easy to talk to. He was aware of the situation. Really, it was a great conversation that we had.
This guy definitely has a media strategy. We've watched 3 videos, and he's used basically the same phrase each time.
Yep. This
is not accidental.
Yes. He's using the same words. This is not off the cuff. These are talking points.
Yeah, this is, and I mean, that's how you want to do it, right? Because you don't want to be winging it, because winging it is how you say something that they end up playing on everything. Like, this is a strong case. That one still bothers me a little. I mean, I get where he was going, that it looks, it's a superficially strong case, but, it might fall apart, is kind of what he was trying to say. And yeah, it's just, you get quoted. So, yeah.
Had given the circumstances of everything involved.
You say that he told you he was shocked that he was arrested. How so and why?
I believe he was shocked by the moment that the police broke his door down, had guns in his face. He was unaware that that was going to happen, and he was really shocked by the arrest. He wasn't expecting it, obviously.
This feels like he's tiptoeing around the issue, because what the reporter's asking is like, is he shocked because he's not, he didn't do it. Whereas what he answers is he was not expecting to get arrested, which sounds a lot like he was planning on getting away. Like he thought he'd gotten away with it. That's what it reads. That's what it sounds like to me. And I think
it comes across as dodge to me. I mean, for that reason, he's asking a question that's going beyond the talking points that he's prepared to talk about. So we're going to shift it back to, now this is the human experience that Brian Kohberger had, of the horrifying moment in the middle of the night of your door being broken down, and windows and the dog barking and your kids crying and chaos and screaming and panic and guns in your face. It's not a bad image.
Yeah, I mean, everybody can kind of empathize with when there are flashbangs going off in your house, it is going to suck.
Yes.
And you might not like Kohberger and you might be like, good, but you can still be like, yeah, no, that would be shocking. But still, I feel like a lot of people are going to be listening to that and parsing that out as, well, he didn't say he was shocked because, he didn't do it. He said he was shocked because he was surprised to actually see them at his door.
Yeah.
Especially
like, how dare they do a full felony apprehension on him?
Yeah, I mean,
don't they know he's a smart guy?
I just remember a client of mine who managed to escape a tactical team perimeter that they set up around his house. He managed to walk through it and leave because he preferred to turn himself in at the police station rather than have guns pointed at him. And I was just like, I can see that, right? But
yeah.
I feel like with the public is so hungry for information on this one and so hungry for details. And they're going to be just reading in so much to this one that the dodge feels like an admission.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of a concern here, is that the dodge feels like they're saying, yeah, he knew he was, he was surprised he got caught, is kind of what it reads as. And I don't think that's what the lawyer is intending to say, but it's what it'll sound like to a lot of people.
Yeah.
So,
to be clear, you drafted a statement with and for your then client, the accused, in which he said, "I will be exonerated." Those were not your words, but do you agree with his assessment?
I agree. That's what he had said to me, that he believed that he would be exonerated, which I believed implicitly that he was innocent of the crimes.
Now that is we're both lawyers. You're just a better one.
I don't know about that.
I do. Your zealous representation responsibility is to do everything you can to advance his cause under law. That's zealous representation. You do not have to say you believe he is innocent. You can say he's not guilty of the charges. They can't make the case. I think that they're speaking out of school. I don't think they have what they think. There's a whole range of qualifying statements. But innocent is something else. Innocent is that you believe he did not do this.
He's trying to pin him down.
Well, I don't want to put those words in my mouth. He said he was eager to be exonerated, which I believed him to mean that he believed he was innocent. I wasn't judging the case at that point in time. I didn't have the affidavit of probable cause. I knew none of the facts, and I didn't ask Brian about any of the facts or circumstances surrounding the case either.
Yep.
Okay, that is very important, and I apologize because I have been slapping you around for making such a heady assessment so early in the case. But now that we put out the statement and you're saying, no, this is what he told you, and that was your takeaway about how he felt about his own situation. Very different. I apologize for any other inference. I'm glad we cleared it up. Now, once you saw the affidavit,
that's kind of a weird interaction.
What do you think now?
There.
Yeah.
I said from the beginning, I read it 4 times through before I think I got most of it soaked in. I felt that it was a strong circumstantial case that's likely to possibly get stronger based upon other evidence that I would expect. But there's certainly holes. Whether or not the prosecution can close those holes is another story for another day.
I don't like his answer to that.
Mm-hmm.
I think the biggest concern is obviously his DNA on the sheath of the knife that was found in the room next to the Mogan body.
We have to know what kind of DNA it is because there is a suggestion that goes like this.
Why is the interviewer doing the heavy lifting on this one?
Somebody who knew who he was with.
Yeah.
Did, without violating, or this would only help his cause, do you have any reason to believe that it could have been somebody else? That he wasn't alone? That the man who was shot in the shootout at Washington State University, the security guard, is he relevant?
I don't have any knowledge of another person being involved. Again, I never asked Brian any of the facts and circumstances surrounding the case. I made that clear from the moment I sat down with him that I was simply there to represent him for the extradition proceedings and that his attorney in Idaho would really be taking the case over and would want to hear his story first.
Is it unusual, even with that admonition, that people don't tell you why they're innocent and why they didn't do this?
Where this is going.
What's wrong with this situation? Help me.
It was certainly a unique situation for me.
Nope.
I've never had it
like
this quite before, where such serious charges an individual was facing. But I really wanted to make sure that he understood that I didn't want to know about the facts and circumstances. And
I don't like that one at all. I don't like that answer.
Yeah.
I would have said, like, listen, this is a unique circumstance. I can't compare this to any other case because this is a unique case. I don't know how to begin judging his reactions.
I would have dodged by saying something like, it's not relevant to the extradition process. It's just not within the scope of what I need to know to do my job. And as I've just explained, it's more in his interest to tell that story to his Idaho attorney. And no, it is not unusual for clients to follow my advice in that regard.
Yeah, I told him that all I was doing was extradition. If he needs help, on the guilt or innocence question, I'm the wrong guy. So he listened to me. That is, what I want from a client, right? And, because, he's like, I made it clear that he should be addressing any of those questions to future counsel. And I think he took that to heart. Would be a good, good sort of way to dodge that. But I don't like it is unique. And I'm like, ooh, ooh, that sounds bad.
Yeah.
Don't like that at all. I feel like on this interview, he's really falling off script.
Yeah, he seems a little bit off his game on this one. I see, I don't mind the strong circumstantial case. I actually think that is clever and deliberately crafted because he is maintaining his credibility, right? He can't be completely unreasonable in his assessment of the evidence, but he's going to force you to use that word circumstantial if you're going to quote him. You know, he's got that sandwich in there where you can't get around. This is a circumstantial case. So I personally like that particular one.
The thing is that I've seen the quotes that are just like, describes the case as strong. And I mean, that's,
if you're going to quote one word, you already know it's going to be cherry picked.
Yeah, I mean, that's sort of an indictment of the state of journalism, but you have to know that's the game, right?
But what I really didn't like is it's likely to get stronger. I tend to agree. Yes, we're at a point where the investigation has only just begun, but you don't suggest that the investigation is likely to be inculpatory towards your client. Okay, it's that the investigation is just getting started, so there is all kinds of information that is likely to either rule him in or rule him out, and at this point it's really too preliminary to be able to say how that's going to go. I
mean, it's real easy to imagine bits of evidence that could come out that just blow their case out of the water.
Sure.
Like, hey, I mean, because it's something like a 10-minute window where they think he was killing 4 people. Like, it's a real tight time frame. And if they just have him on video at a Starbucks somewhere, the case falls apart, right? That's the end of it. Because no matter how much circumstantial evidence you've got, if it's like, here's the timestamp, and we know that it's the right timestamp, and here he is somewhere else, then that's the end of the case. And they could find something like that if we, like maintaining the guy's got the presumption of innocence. He might straight up be innocent, at which point we're looking at this like, okay, that's a possibility, right? So, I mean, I would have wanted to put something in there just to say like, the new evidence could throw the case in any direction. We don't know.
Yes. That would be a very good way to put it. And, one of the things that I think the problem with being a defense attorney, of course, is you get a very skewed perspective on, the world and life and how people think and all of that type of thing. It's just part of the nature of the beast. But I don't think he doesn't seem to have a real appreciation for how his own read on things as skeptic can potentially come off. I would have liked to have seen him do something like point out that in every single case where somebody has been wrongfully convicted and later exonerated, there were circumstances that made that person look guilty, that led the police to make the report, the prosecutor to file a charge, and the jury to convict. So that is not unusual for there to be guilty-looking circumstances, attending innocent people. So, and this is not game over. This is just the beginning.
Ultimately, if you let me pick a random person from Moscow, Idaho, and go through every element of their life and selectively put facts out, I could probably make just about anybody look guilty. Right. If you just wanted to go and be like, so at this time they were in the, the neighborhood. We have no explanation as to why they were there at that time. This person has been known to own knives because, I mean, I've seen that in police reports before. Who doesn't own a knife? Like children, maybe, but I did as a kid.
You're not from the West.
Like,
children have knives and 22s out here.
I had a knife at like age 5. So, but like, every adult, has kitchen knives, right? So like, you're like, this person owned several knives, which might, have not, or are based on current knowledge, are consistent with the murder weapon, because the current knowledge is just a knife. So, I mean, could be a kitchen knife, could be a K-bar, could be whatever. The knives appeared to have been recently cleaned because people wash knives pretty much, on the regular. So, I mean, all of these things could be, could be things where you're just like, yeah, this is entirely possible and we just don't know. Yeah. So, I just don't know. And I'm not, I'm always skeptical of that, but, it's, I feel that he could have done better here. Some of this stuff, I mean, Cuomo's asking very carefully crafted questions.
Yes, he is.
And
he's pushing the limits, and he knows that.
Yep. And some of those questions, I see the question and I'm like, oh crap. Right. Because some of those questions would be hard to answer well without sort of dodging the question. But I mean, you got to be aware this is the risk.
Yeah. And this is the game. The dodge is a critical part of the game.
Yeah. It's essential. And I mean, this kind of comes off like somebody, like somebody kind of trying to play a fast one with the judges there. So, yeah. All right. Let's see.
I did cut him off several times before he was able to tell me anything about the case.
He asked when he was arrested, we are told. Has anyone else been arrested? Does that sound right to you?
That's my understanding of what's out there. When I spoke to Brian about what he said to the police, and he did speak to police for approximately 5 to 15 minutes before invoking his Miranda rights, he couldn't recall what he had actually said to them.
That's common.
Did his disposition, his demeanor to you,
it's almost always
as
bad.
Someone who was or was not connected to what happened?
I don't really want to judge that. I treat my clients with respect and build a rapport with them, even for the short period of time that I was speaking with Brian. I wanted his trust for that short period of time, so he understood what I was trying to do for him. I thought was in his best interest. I still believe what I'm doing for him even now is in his best interest. So I really wanted to build that rapport, and I don't question.
He's clearly got
like
a strategy.
Especially
Counselor,
without seeing the affidavit of probable cause.
Hey, thank you for watching. Please go to newsnationnow.com, newsnationnow.com, and you can find News Nation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button down below. Then you will get more of News Nation's fact.
So, and I see somebody here saying, usually strong on the ethical professional responsibility side of things. I'm surprised he's not outraged. At this point, the only thing I can conclude is that he must have a waiver.
Yes.
Because if he didn't have a waiver, he would have been told to shut up real hard, real fast. And I mean, to a degree that he probably would have been suspended. And what I mean by that is, like, his new counsel says, stop doing interviews. He does an interview after that. His new counsel goes to the bar and is like, I need you to hammer this guy. And they probably would.
Yeah.
Right.
No, if there's no waiver, I don't think there's any doubt about that. With a case of this magnitude, that's a huge, risk of tanking, the situation. So the fact that there doesn't seem to be any consequences, negative consequences for him doing this, and just combined with the strategic appearing approach to it, it looks to me like this is and was and kind of always has been the plan.
Yeah, there's got to be a waiver there, because if there wasn't, if this isn't strategic, then he's burning his career down. Like, that's the end of it. So Yeah, it's and Rob is here fishing for dates. Happy birthday to all those January babies out there. Nobody in particular, especially any persons born January 11th, 25th, 17th, 23rd, 7th, 2nd, 23rd, 13th, or 30th. Just saying happy January birthdays. So he's kind of shotgunning to see if he's my birthday is soon and I've got a birthday stream coming up, but yeah. It's I don't like I mean the biggest thing is just him talking about the demeanor and so forth. I would be perfectly fine with this if he wasn't talking about that. The problem is that also I don't know if they'd be talking to him if he wasn't willing to talk about that.
Mm-hmm.
That might be the bait that lets him get out the, hey, can we not just proceed directly to conviction, guys?
It could. And I don't know. This is strategic. I would have to think part of the strategy with Brian is what's your story of how you want the public to see you? This narrative is being spun up of, this crazy loser, loner weirdo who was, overweight, bully, and then et cetera, et cetera. So, I mean,
yeah,
no, there's no proof of that, but I would expect that this plan of how are we going to present you? How do you want me to describe you to the press? Surely was at least came up in conversations about how this was going to go down.
Yeah. And I mean, that's probably where the whole like calm, collected, he doesn't want people seeing him as a psycho. He doesn't want people seeing him as a weirdo.
Mm-hmm.
And both of those are things that I think the prosecution is going to try to present him, I think, as a weirdo. It's the approach I'd be looking at right now. This guy's a strange guy.
Yeah.
When we see, when you look at all the, the mug shots of Kohberger, he's got a weird facial expression. He kind of has that weird stare to him.
Got the Senpaku eyes is the problem.
Yeah.
The three whites showing. It's creepy looking. I'm sorry. It is.
And I mean, there's not a whole lot that he can do about that. And I guess the messaging of I'm not a creepy weirdo is useful. So we shall have to see. But I'm not super upset. The main reason I'm not super upset is it's really clear. He's dropping hints of like, hey, I am not talking out of school. I've been, I have permission without specifically saying so.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I feel like that comes through clear. And I think they did take some very important steps to insulate Brian, from potential blowback resulting from things like, okay, if you really did just now flat waive your attorney-client privilege, fine, then we just make it so there's nothing there, that's really worth going after anyway. Yes, there can always be like something that they can try to dig or try to get into, but the bottom line is that without, some kind of admission from Brian or some kind of counter story, that can then be investigated and explored and stuff like that, I just don't see that he would have a lot that would be super damaging. Okay, you thought he was calm.
You could go on a fishing trip for something more, but I mean, I think the other thing is he's making it real clear that these are dangerous waters to fish in.
Yeah.
Like there's not a whole lot that he's given that is damaging.
Yeah.
He was calm. Great. That's not super big. And you know what? They could probably get that kind of demeanor evidence out through the booking officers.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh, and it's going to be people, the officers who transported him. I mean, he's had contact with other humans from the moment he was taken into custody.
And much friendlier witness other humans.
Yeah.
Like, the officer who transports him is not actively going to be trying to figure out a way to blow up the prosecution's case, which, this guy might, if they put him up on the stand, he might be like, I believed him when he said he was innocent.
Yeah.
So I don't think I'd call him blind as a prosecutor. So, and I see somebody saying, if he has a waiver, why wouldn't he just say that instead of having people attack his ethics? Why would he take a credibility hit for some random?
You got to meet some public defenders, man. If he thinks it's in his client's best interest, he will throw himself under the bus.
That's the thing is, at the end of the day, you just take the hit. And I don't see a reason why he's going to want to talk about the waiver. He doesn't want to make this look strategic. He wants to, he actually kind of wants to make this look like it's off the cuff and maybe not what Kohberger, like he wants, I mean, he's kind of, it looks to me like he's hiding the game he's actually playing here, which is the media game. He's dropped hints about it that you and I can spot, but a lot of, so, I mean, yeah, it's, I think he's trying to avoid saying, hey, listen, this is a strategic, this is a game to sort of fool the public here.
Well, and it's also, like you pointed out, you don't necessarily need to wave a flag at the state to say, hey, I've got a full waiver here. You can ask me anything and everything about, about whatever. That is a little bit inviting, more of that kind of approach than you're necessarily trying to accomplish. I think you're hedging against that. But, it still doesn't mean that you're trying to make that happen.
And ultimately, right now, if they wanted to get this in, they'd actually have to have a hearing on whether or not privilege has been waived. So that creates just a procedural headache for the prosecution that they might not want to go through if they don't know what they're going to get out of it.
Yeah. Rob was saying attorneys love to take the body blows. Their client gets to land the knockout punch. Yes, absolutely. Yep. And it's not just that. It's that you learn that your best opportunity to punch is when you're getting punched, okay? Because that's where you are guaranteed to have an opening as long as you can find it. So yes, you bait all of those punches so that you can counter them.
Yeah, I mean, I have had plenty of trials. I had a trial where the judge was ripping me a new one because I wouldn't admit this document. And I just wouldn't agree that this document was admissible. And he's like, well, it's clearly just a technical violation. And I'm like, they don't get technical shortcuts on this particular kind of document. It's this document is an evidentiary shortcut. Therefore, they're held to strict compliance in order to get to use that. And the judge was just like, well, don't you think you're being unreasonable? I'm like, this is the law. This is, we're here to follow the law, sir. That's all I can do. And the judge was super pissed and acquitted my client because ultimately he's like, I think you're being unreasonable, but I guess this document's not admissible and the prosecution wasn't able to prove their case without it. And I'm like, why are you giving me grief over, I just won the case? Like that is literally what I'm here to do. Yeah. So,
no, it's not a job you do because you expect to get a lot of accolades and pats on the back. The few, like I mentioned earlier, the small town public, profile cases that I even have, oh my gosh, are they grist for the fan mail, the names I've been called. It's just, that is part of the job that you are absolutely going to accept. When you decide this is what you want to do.
I get people sending me messages going, oh, you keep bad people on the street. I'm like, sometimes, but you know what? It's not my job to incarcerate them. That's somebody else's job. So you should really go after the people who screwed up on their end.
Exactly.
Not the person who did their job well, but also I've had several instances. I had a prosecutor at one point who thanked me afterwards. And he said, I walked into this all certain that your client was guilty. And I walked out of it certain that your client wasn't. And, he's like, thank you, because absent you being here to advocate, I would have been inclined to, try to push for a conviction of a guy I think is innocent. He, at the end of the trial, was just like, the judge is like, what are closing arguments? And the Crown's closing argument was, based on all the evidence you've heard today, you should acquit this individual.
Never mind.
We invite you to do so.
Wow.
And the judge is just like, Mr. Runkle, I'm not going to need to hear your close. You know? And somebody was saying, please tell me that fan mail is code for hate mail. Yes, that's exactly what we mean.
Yes, that is what it is.
Defense lawyers, you might get like a thank you letter from a client, or sometimes like the client's family. You otherwise basically just take shit. You take shit from the court.
Person. How do you defend those people? You're the reason, X, Y, Z.
Yeah, you take shit from the court. You take shit from the media. Yeah. There's so many more shows, like TV shows, talking about prosecution and policing than there are about defense work. And the ones that are defense work love to pull the thing of, I only represent innocent people. It's like,
yes,
you never actually know that until the trial, right? Like, it's like,
it's not the majority of the job anyway. That's the thing that is just, I don't know. It feels like it's this dirty secret, but it's so obvious to anybody that works in depth in the criminal justice system. Most of the people are guilty. They will tell you that they're guilty. They will plead guilty. Your job in representing them is not to argue with that and try to make a case for innocence, for there isn't one. Your job in that situation is to try to get them the best outcome that you can. Make sure it's the right charge. Make sure it's the right sentence recommendation. Make sure that they know this is how you're going to need to, transfer your property once, they send you off to prison.
Yep. And I mean, I've done way more things for clients where it's like, okay, we're pleading this guilty. I need to be the guy in the room who argues for you to get a lesser sentence, because there's going to be a guy arguing for the moon, you should be in jail forever. Somebody needs to be there to say, maybe not, right? Maybe there's reasons this happened. Maybe there's mitigating circumstances. And the public loves to get upset about sentences. And there's interesting studies that have been done, and they've been done in the States and in Canada. And it goes like this. When you ask people if a sentence was too high, just right, or too low, and they read the news reports, they will invariably, you get this massive thing of people saying the sentence was too low. But if you actually put them into the courtroom and they get to hear all of the things that the courts say, all the things that the courts hear, it shifts. People will say that the sentences are too high. They're sympathetic when they actually get to hear the hear the reasons that are being articulated and so forth. And it's amazing, like what just leaving key facts out or delivering something in a sort of sarcastic tone, right? Like, oh, this person blames their childhood. It's like, well, sure, their childhood was horrific. It's kind of hard to imagine anybody coming back from that. And
the point that I often make is part of the benefit that I got, if you want to call it that, from working in a small town is you handle a lot of different things. And so I had the experience of getting to see, my kids that I represented in the foster care system, graduating into becoming my adult felony clients. And it's a very sad, path to see happen, but it is just very common. That is a very common pathway in crime. But it just made it so clear to me that we have so much sympathy for these children in the foster system, the circumstances that are beyond their control. They didn't ask to be born into it. They didn't ask to be treated like this. There's all this sympathy and drive for a child. But then as soon as that child, is 18 and makes a mistake, like the sympathy is gone. That it's still the same person, it's still the same child with the same needs and the same wounds, but they just aren't as cute as they were.
I used to send out, I haven't done it in some years, but I used to send out sort of birthday cards for my youth clients when they hit 18. And those cards basically said, you need to know happy birthday. Welcome to being 18. You now need to know that the sentencing regime is going to be a lot stricter. All of the things, all of the breaks that they used to cut you, they will not cut you anymore. Yeah. And you need to know that if you commit offenses at this point, you might bring your youth record into a situation where it's now part of your adult record. If you need resources, please reach out. I will be happy to try to get you, I can work with you to try to get you into a rehab bed. I can work with you to try to get you into anger management. I can work with you to try to, I've got some employers who I know will take somebody so long as you're willing to work and you have, you're a warm body and relatively physically able. Just reach out to me. And some of them did, but a lot of them didn't. And then I'd see them later and it's just like, all right, now you're in a world of trouble. And, that's a place where I'm just like, what can we do here? Right. It's just, so yeah, no winners. And Rob was talking about family law, noting, try practicing family law. There are no winners. Everyone is at fault in different ways. And the only innocents, the kids, are offered up to the judge to decide after hearing 4 days of testimony. Yep. And, attorneys have to deal with so much vicarious trauma. How do you deal with it all?
Black humor, numbness, alcohol. How about you, Ian?
Pretty much the same thing. There's jokes lawyers will tell that we don't talk about in public. We had a new lawyer, an articling student, and he told a joke as we were walking to court, and I had to stop him, and I was like, never outside the office. We can joke, we can tell some jokes in the office. I said, somebody hears you on the way, you don't want that, and the guy's like, well, I'm like, you just can't, and it's horrible, but some of the stuff that we have to deal with is so ugly. And if you can't deflect it with some humor, it destroys you.
Yes.
Alcoholism is rampant in the profession. I mean, I enjoy a drink, but I don't really get too pickled. Because I find if I get too smashed, I start to think about things that I don't want to think about. So that's something I avoid.
Yes, Rob, I punch people in the face. It's an absolutely wonderful coping strategy that I recommend to everyone with consent in a ring.
Yeah, I mean, the problem is that the people you'd probably want most to go after don't volunteer to be in the ring with you.
It's true. You end up punching the people that you like the best.
It's like, could you just pretend to be this particular prosecutor who pulled an absolute, absolute BS thing? Yeah, I mean, I'm sitting here. I've got a little leatherwork project that I fiddle with, but stuff to distract yourself. So you just do what you can. All right, I think we've got, did we get to the end of this?
Give me your sense of the man and in the context of the situation.
Oh yeah, we got to the sense or to the end and then it's looping. It's yeah. I don't like some of it. I'm not as, I thought I was going to be ranting and raging. Straight up. I thought I was just going to be like, this guy needs to be disbarred. And if he didn't have permission, he does. But I don't see how he's dropping all the hints that he had permission.
Yeah.
That's my take on this. He must have had permission. Yeah. And he would have been, they would have shut him up by now if he didn't.
Yeah, I think that this was definitely strategic. This was a plan to send him out to be the wartime conciliary. And I think there's plenty of room to argue about how effectively he has carried out that role. I mean, obviously, we have critiqued a lot of the things that he's said and, found ways that perhaps it could have been improved upon. But I'm not going to grade him too hard, honestly. I think that he hasn't done anything that's super damaging. There are just some things that are kind of like, would have preferred a different way to say that could be twisted easily, relatively editorial types of comments to it. But
the
as
worst
far as
things he said will be far less damaging than, say, the statements the police have put out.
yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So, and I will give him points because, like, you, me, like lots, well, not so much us, lots of people have been basically saying this guy is the worst person ever.
Yeah.
And I don't know that he's the worst person ever. I don't know that I would have agreed with this strategy. I probably would have said, let's not do this. Let's just try to keep our heads down. And it might be the wrong call. But whatever, like, strategic decisions, he's certainly volunteered himself as, you know, he's going to take some crap over this.
Well, he is, and it took some balls for him to do this. You know, he knew that all these lawyers watching these interviews are going to be clutching their pearls at him making the public statements and, you know, kind of breaching that culture of don't talk about the case, don't talk about your communications and stuff. So and he knew this was coming, and he did it. I mean, I think that's pretty badass, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, I can just see that this guy is going to, you know, he's going to get crap from just not only, you know, like us YouTube commenters. He's going to get crap on, what do you call it? You know, for just, like when he goes out for drinks with his friends, there's going to be people going like, so, have you ever considered shutting your mouth? Right? Like, you know, he's going to have to justify that to some people. And I see somebody noting he's closed off potential lines of defense. Yeah, but the lines of defense he's closed off, I don't think are ones that Kohberger is likely to go with.
Yeah, I don't think they're real viable anyway. I mean, the insanity defense in Idaho is extremely limited. It's extremely limited. Like, basically, unless you are floridly psychotic, it's not going to happen. And it's not going to take long to figure out this guy is not floridly psychotic. If he becomes that way, you're going to notice.
And I mean, he's getting his PhD in criminology and so forth. I mean, the other thing is, even if he was floridly psychotic, you know what's going to happen if you try to run that defense? They're going to say, okay, let's look at all the classes he's taught or been in and how many of them covered the exact requirements for being declared to be, you know, insane. You know, this guy is pretty much your textbook choice for, you know, this guy is, you know, excellently set up to fake it. Therefore, you shouldn't believe him. And they're going to say, we don't believe him. I don't think, I mean, it was on the table nominally as a potential strategy you could take. I don't think it was ever a good strategy.
Yeah. I don't think it was ever a good strategy. And I just don't get the impression it's a strategy that he wants to pursue. I mean, just, again, you have to take a lot of stuff kind of with a grain of salt, but assuming that, yes, this was a strategic decision they made, and that included how he wanted to be presented. And I kind of, you know, I don't put too much weight on all the things that people say about him now, because I think that that's fairly distorted. But nevertheless, you know, there's been this picture of him that's been painted as somebody who does pride himself on his intelligence. I think somebody characterized it as he comes across as the smartest person in the room. You know, always.
That's a dangerous thing when you're accused of a crime.
It is, but that is not consistent. Also, with wanting to be you know, wanting the public to see you as a lunatic psycho murderer. You know, if you want to be the smartest guy in the room, you're probably not so crazy that you freaked out and, you know, murdered 4 people randomly. So,
well, and I mean, if he is sort of a smart, calculating guy, he's probably looking at this going, right now their case isn't super strong. Do I really want to end up in a mental hospital on this one? Or do I want to beat this one and maybe have a life afterwards? And I mean, to be fair, even if he's acquitted on this, this is a life-destroying charge.
Yes,
because he's gonna have a hell of a time getting work. I bet, you know, if he's acquitted, I don't think they let him finish his PhD. And if he does finish his PhD, he applies everywhere for work and is turned down by everywhere. He was applying at police stations before this.
Yeah.
which police station do you think is going to take him? Keeping in mind that police tend to believe that everyone who is acquitted of a charge who isn't a cop just got away with things. Cops are properly admitted. Cops are properly acquitted, and but everyone else just gets away with it because they've got some fancy, that high-priced public defender.
Sure.
And to be fair, public defenders get a lot of shit. Public defenders are also typically excellent at what they do because they do a ton of, they tend to do a ton of cases. So long as they're properly resourced, public defenders are excellent. I will rant about like My Cousin Vinny and their presentation of the public defender.
Yeah.
That's like my only sort of note on that file or on that movie is like, did you really have to? Like, you could just have them decide to prefer Vinny. Like, but yeah. I mean, I don't know. It's tough to say. I see somebody saying that he closed off a lot of other potential defenses. I don't know how many potential defenses he really closed off here.
Mm-hmm.
I think that his main defense of prove it is still on the table.
Yeah, it's very much. And not only is it on the table, the seed has been planted that there are things to do here. That was a very important seed to plant.
Yeah. And I mean, I think that, I think it's important that we remember that, no matter what somebody's charged with, there's always the question of maybe they didn't, right? Mm-hmm. And in fact, maybe they didn't is the starting place. It's the, it's where we begin on all of this.
Yeah.
And I see somebody saying, seems like acquitted, accused, released tend to legally change name and move. I mean, the problem is in a lot of places you have to publish your change of name. Mm-hmm. But in that case, what you do is you change your name, you move to somewhere where you don't have to publish it, you stay there for however long it takes, and then you change your name again and move again.
Yeah.
But I mean, his face is real recognizable.
Yeah.
If he doesn't like get plastic surgery or something, no matter what his name is, people are going to recognize him.
Yeah. No, there's no starting over for him.
Yeah, it's starting over would be so much work.
Maybe somewhere overseas, maybe he could vanish into the Philippines. I don't know.
Yeah.
Anybody from the Philippines in that?
Get a job teaching English overseas, do something like that for a bit. But I just don't see him restarting, even if he's acquitted. So I know that sounds like that's dire, but I mean, that's the case for a lot of people who are acquitted of things. I've had to tell clients this. I'm like, here's the good news. Good news is I am like 90% certain we're going to beat this at trial. Bad news is you're still not getting your life back.
Yeah.
It's like, because you get guys, I've had people accused of serious crimes. Their wife leaves them. Their job fires them.
Yep.
All of that falls apart. And, they're like, are they going to pay me for any of this? And I'm like, nope, not one dime. They're like, what do you mean? Like, they don't pay you for them accusing you wrongly. Yep. Well, that's not fair. And, will they like talk to my wife? I'm like, nope, that's up to you. And honestly, she doesn't want to talk to you. You're done. Like, that relationship has ended. It's not your fault, but like, you can't fix this. This is what she thinks of you. So,
yeah. And they're not only not going to pay you, they're not going to apologize. They are, in fact, going to continue to insist to themselves in their own mind, and potentially to others that, you got away with it. There's no unringing that bell.
I had to send an email to a particular cop at one point to say, hey, you're allowed to think whatever you want about my client. You can't keep going around to everybody he's ever met to accuse him of, or to say that he was wrongly acquitted. Mm-hmm. Like, now you're fighting with a defamation suit and you need to, and a police complaint.
Yes.
And he's like, am I gonna get compensation for that? I'm like, honestly, probably not. Like, you
No.
could try to launch a defamation action. I will tell you that they'll probably side with the cop.
Mhm.
Like, you know, this is the circumstance you live with. And it's super unsatisfying for people, especially people who've been wrongfully accused, and especially people who've been wrongfully accused by somebody who is malicious, right? Because that
Yeah.
happens.
Absolutely.
You know, you get like false complaints of domestic violence, which happens by an angry ex. And, you know, they're like, what do you mean I get no protection from the system from this happening again? It's like, nope. Honestly, if she went in and made a complaint tomorrow, they would arrest you again.
Yeah. And part of what's so frustrating about it, I think, is because when you're in that perspective, in that situation, you gain this perspective on the enormous power that the system has against you, you know, to be able to cause these massive, absolutely massive life-changing consequences to you. But when it comes to putting you, you know, back where you were, restoring you to where you should have been, the legal system is not very well equipped to do pretty much anything except for, you know, those limited skills of putting people in jail and, you know, handing kids to one side or the other. There's a lot that people expect the legal system to be able to accomplish that it just can't do. And righting those types of wrongs is very much part of that.
Well, and people say, like, you know, this isn't fair. And I'm like, you are exactly right. It's not. I'm not going to pretend it's fair. I'm not going to pretend what's happening to you is okay. I am just going to tell you that this is what is happening. And, you know, we will do the best we can with the, you know, with what we've got, but it's not fair. Like, you need to, you know, and clients really don't like hearing that. And people in the justice system don't like hearing that, because you're like, this is not, you know, somebody's like, hey, you know, I've been arrested. What do you mean I'm not going to get bail? And it's like, well, you've got a record that's, you know, 13 pages long. And sure, their case on this one is crap, but they're still not going to grant you bail because you've got this terrible record. And they're like, but, and I'm like, you know, you need to realize that that is just where you sit. Like, that is all that it is. And you do the best you can with that, but people get frustrated. Domestic violence, false complaints. Actually, here's a fun one. There was a scam that was running in the area for a while. A particular group of people was pulling it. And I got actually to learn their names because they were doing it repeatedly. So, attractive young woman with a meth addiction goes to the bar. And she finds a guy and picks him up. And if she feels like it, she sleeps with him. But otherwise, she just goes home with him and doesn't sleep with him, but sleeps over. And then she just doesn't leave. She just, you know, it's the morning and he's like, so you got to go. And she's like, yeah, no. And he either gets violent to eject her or doesn't. And she'll make a false complaint and say, hey, you know, this is what went down. And then, so he gets arrested for, you know, for domestic violence, which he may have been violent, or he may have, like, trying to kick her out, or he may have just been like, you need to go. And she's like, I'm going to call the cops and tell them you hit me. And so he gets conditions, and she says, I've been living here for 6 months. That's what she tells the cops. So the cops put conditions on him not to go to his place.
Yeah.
Because she lives there and they're trying to protect her from him, right?
Sure.
So at that point, they go and start, her and her friends start selling all of his stuff. And they start, I've seen it get as far as when they run out of stuff, they start pulling the copper out of the walls. And, you know, he comes back and he either stays away, in which case they keep selling his stuff, but sometimes they, like, find out that their stuff is being sold. Like, the neighbor calls up and is like, hey, you need to know, like, they're running a flea market out of your house.
Yeah, I had a situation like this where the neighbor tipped the guy off that the wife and her family, her mother and like some other people were in the house with a jackhammer because there was a floor safe that was installed in a concrete pad, and they were in the house jackhammering out the guy's floor safe while he's excluded, because of the protective order.
Yeah, and he goes there, and then he gets breached.
Yep.
And eventually they deny him bail because he keeps breaching.
Yep.
And then they just clean out his house. They don't show up for the trial on the alleged domestic, and he gets cleared, and he goes to his house, and it's like a ruin, right? Everything that this guy's ever done is gone. And because that person said that it was domestic violence, they don't even prosecute. Yeah. They just let this slide. And I've seen this happen repeatedly. And these people are like, where's my justice? And I'm like, I don't have anything to give you. Like, I don't have a fix for this. All you need to know is this is broken and like it's wrong what's happening. I agree. Like, you have my sympathy, but I can't fix it. I don't have a remedy. And you just do your best to try to get somebody to spot that this is spot that this is an issue. So yeah, well, yeah, I was expecting this to be worse. And honestly, I mean, this is why I love having you on these things, because you're really, I tend to agree with your views most out of all of the people out there. And so when I see people saying one thing and you saying another, I'm like, I gotta look into this. And so that's why I'm like, we gotta do this, sort of as a joint stream here, because there's a lot of sort of voices out there, but you've always got the best research and the best sort of careful thinking on things. So I always appreciate your content. Everybody, Andrea Burkhart, check out her channel. It is fantastic stuff, because you are the person who's just like, yep, I have researched this every way there is, and here is the analysis, and you do good analysis. So,
well, thank you, Ian. I appreciate it. And of all of the channels I could have gone on to watch these and watch you watch them, there's nowhere else I wanted to be.
Well, thank you. It's I mean, I was just sitting here going, because I'm hearing all these reports and like this guy's breaching privilege, and I'm like, oh God, I'm gonna be so upset by this. And then you're like, I don't know about that, and I'm going, I gotta dig in. So yeah, no. So I guess we've got super chats. You're welcome to stick around. I'll just do a quick scan if there's one that's sort of directly aimed at you here. We do have one. This wasn't a super chat, but I try to sort of look at chats here as well. Sure. Andrea, you're coming into this with a slightly different opinion than some of the law tubers. With that said, would you do these interviews if you were the lawyer in question?
It's so hard to make that call because I've never been in that situation with that kind of case, and I don't aspire to. My gut instinct is to say no. I would not. I would stick with my tried and true strategy of shutting up and not doing it. But I think, like Ian said, I'm not 100% sure that that's actually the right call in this case.
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty sure I wouldn't have. I'm pretty sure that they would have called me and I would have been like, yeah, bye, click. But it might be the wrong call. It might be that this guy is, if Kohberger's acquitted, there's an argument that this played a key role in it. And, as a sort of person who does defense work, like that's a good thing for your client, right? It's so I feel like this one's a tough call. And we love to have the idea that we're all, lawyers have an ego. And so we love it's a thing. We love to have the idea that we always would, do the right thing in every scenario and whatever else. But obviously some lawyers don't. And sometimes that might be us, right? Where you make the wrong call.
Yes.
And as much as we sort of present ourselves often as like we are the ultimate knowers of things, we've all, like, if you do trial work, you have had the moments of walking out of a trial going, I screwed that up, right?
Yep.
Like,
You've just been gut punched.
Yep. I thought I was asking the right questions, but I just got schooled by that witness. That my whole trial strategy turns out to have been a bad one. This kind of stuff happens where you go in and you expect it to go one way and it goes another, and that's all you can do. So you got to develop a little bit of humility. And I feel like doing YouTube is good for that too, because people often ask for like a public prediction. And so I can make my call, and then that call's either right or it's wrong.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's been wrong, right? Sometimes I've been wrong on things.
I think putting your cards down in public does a lot, I think, for, I don't want to say just establishing your credibility. I mean, obviously it does. Honestly, just being willing to do that, takes a certain amount of guts that is persuasive.
Yeah, well, I know for a while Nate was sort of running with I don't think he gave himself the nickname, but other people were, of the Loracle, because he called something like 6 or 7 cases in a row correctly.
Oh wow.
Which, I mean, is really good.
Yeah.
But I mean, that streak broke. I forget which one it was that fooled, that got him, but like that streak broke. We all get stuff wrong, and for every moment when a YouTuber gets it wrong on, like, here's what I think is going to happen at this trial, including like we've got it wrong of like all the evidence is in and now it's going to verdict. Yeah. And Rob says, also, we don't argue with each other at all. Never. I'd never disagree with Andrea or Ian on anything. Not ever.
Not ever. Depends. Am I being paid to disagree?
Well, there's lots of lawyers who I respect the heck out of, and who there have been times when I'm like, I don't agree with your take. And, sometimes I've been right on that and sometimes I've been wrong. I would love to be able to sit here and be like, I am the super, I am inevitably correct in all circumstances, but
it would also be nice, I guess. Actually, it probably kind of wouldn't, but if the law was kind of like a math problem, you just have to plug these things in and you just get the answer, and everybody who does the same thing will get the same answer. It doesn't work like that. It's a very subjective process. There's a lot of judgment involved. A lot of it depends, Yep.
And Normie, yes, I will. We'll get to that soon, but I can say I've had moments when I've told clients, I'm like, here's the thing. Right now I'm giving you, your odds are 50-50. I say those odds are going to change. I'm going to give you a new number as soon as I see the judge walk in. And, the judge comes in, I'm like, your odds are now 70% in our favor, or your odds are now 30%.
Yeah.
And the client's like, what do you mean? I'm like, this judge doesn't like acquittals. So like, he tends to see things more towards prosecution. So yeah, it just, it happens, right? It's, you got to have some humility. So I can't say, I wish I could just say, yeah, this guy's an idiot and he's wrong. And, he's a bad person. He shouldn't be a lawyer, all of that fun stuff, but I can't say that.
Yeah.
No, I mean, there are circumstances where you can totally throw shade. Binger.
I'm not here to defend Avenatti.
Yeah, or like Binger.
Yeah.
I mean, that was a dumb case prosecuted badly. So
who was the Alex Jones's attorney who had the little mishap with the inadvertent attorney-client communications being attorney-client work product being disclosed that surprised Alex Jones on the stand? I forget about that, but that guy, he deserves some shade.
Yeah, where it was like, were you aware that I had this? And the guy's like,
yeah,
nope. And it's like, well, we let you know we had it ages ago, and you didn't object during the objection phase, so now it goes in free and clear. Whoop, we've just lost Andrea here. Yeah, I give odds at different stages: courthouse, then judge assignment, then daily docket, then opposing counsel. Yep, all these things can affect it. While we see if Andrea is able to get back, we'll cover some super chats here. I have mobile broadband, covers the entire farm, 200 connection and unlimited. I pay $35 a month. Bragging from Sweden. You bastard. Because I can say my connection is not that good or that cheap. We lost you there for a second.
You did. I don't know. I don't know if my internet gave up the ghost. Am I still roboting?
Not as badly, at least voice wise. Your video is still a little shaky, but
all right, I'll turn the camera off.
Yeah, no, that was a major oops on that lawyer. Did you also see the moment when the lawyer looked like he was going to fight the other lawyer in that trial?
Yes. Yes, I did.
Yeah. I have never had cause to fight another lawyer. And like at the end of the day, it's your client, right? It's your client who suffers whatever consequences. So why would you get that upset to fight somebody? Like,
well, I will say I have experienced some prosecutors who like to make it personal. I can appreciate the temptation.
Yeah, a while back, I had a prosecutor who accused me of lying in a proceeding. And I was like, you're going to back that up or you're going to walk that back because what the hell?
Yeah.
And yeah, they didn't like that one at all when I was like, you care to, hey, you're dropping that? Come get my law license.
Yeah.
Come get it. But like
put up or shut up time with that kind of accusation.
And one judge who I'd appeared in front of a different prosecutor basically suggested, well, Mr. Runkle is representing this to the court, but how do we know it's true?
Oh, boy.
And she's like, I'm going to stop you there. Mr. Runkle has appeared in front of me on a large number of occasions. I have no questions about his his integrity as an officer of the court. So you basically have two options right now. You can back away from that, or let's see some evidence. And the guy's like, well, I'm just saying we don't have any proof. And she's like, well, he just said that he had this conversation directly with somebody. That's his representation. So, you're saying that didn't happen? Well, I'm saying we don't know it happened. It's like, you need to talk to somebody about what you can and can't say in court, because if you can't back that up, you shouldn't be making this argument today.
Yeah.
She's like, so, and she sent a letter to him CCing his boss, explaining what had happened.
Oh,
and I got an apology from his boss.
Wow.
Going like, yeah, I'm sorry that happened. I've seen you in court. Like, I've got no issues about your ethics or professionalism. Yeah, we're so yeah, but even then I haven't been like, let's get into a fist fight here in court. So,
probably the closest I got was one occasion where I did file a rather fiery appellant's brief on behalf of a client with some basically shenanigans to try to evade his constitutional rights by a prosecutor who not only has a history, of prosecutorial misconduct, depriving defendants of their constitutional rights 4 freaking times. Okay, you know how many prosecutors make it through their entire careers without ever once having been found to have committed misconduct? This guy is now on his 5th strike. Okay, I'm sorry, no order from me. I am going to call you out on that. But yeah. I had the receipts, so it is what it is. But he probably did want to punch me in the face.
I mean, that's the thing is, if I start dropping that, it's because I've got the receipts. And
yes.
Yep, it's I had one prosecutor actually get upset because I cited a decision where that prosecutor was previously found to have misbehaved. And he's like, you don't cite that case with me. And I'm like, but it's the case, and also it's you. So yeah, I do. He's like, wow, it's I'm like, Like, seriously, if you don't want people to bring up that you're engaging in shenanigans, stop engaging in shenanigans.
Oh God, that's fun. That is so fun.
Oh, I mean, it takes so much for a prosecutor to get called out on things sometimes.
It does. Yes, it does.
And so when it finally, when it happens, it's like, yeah, we're going to talk about it because, yeah, it's frustrating and it's dangerous. Like when you see the cases where people have been wrongfully convicted, so many of those involve like the prosecution playing some sort of game.
Yes.
You had the exculpatory evidence and you just chose not to do anything with it. Like, disclose it to defense.
The career advancement game, they're not gonna get to the next level by, not getting a big conviction and a big case. They're going to game the system to their own advantage. It happens over and over and over again. The big eye opener, I thought, for a lot of people was the Ted Stevens case way back when that happened. I mean, it's been well more than a decade now. But for me, it felt like that was the first time I had really heard of public accountability for prosecutors engaging in these kinds of tactics and just the havoc that can wreak. I mean, Ted Stevens, think what you want of his politics or whatever, but he was a very long time career politician, lost his, entire career as a result of it. I'm sure to this day, there are people that think, he was in the wrong and he was guilty. All the stuff we've been talking about, that you never really can come back from a false accusation. And it turns out that it's just all of this stuff that shenanigans that the police and the prosecutors were engaging in.
Yeah, and I mean it's tragic. People lose like 20 years of their lives, and then ultimately, they figure it out. I'm looking at doing the Milgard case for one of the trials of the century, and it was, the guy lost tons of time, and ultimately they clear him, and it turns out that the guy who had actually committed the murder, who the police could have caught a long time earlier, he committed a whole bunch of very serious crimes against women in the meantime. And it's like, that wouldn't have happened if he was in custody for the murders.
Yeah. So,
and, they'll blame the defense lawyer when, if somebody gets acquitted and then goes on to commit a crime, they'll certainly be like, his, scummy defense lawyer.
Here's his name and photograph and home address.
Sometimes.
Yeah.
I've had them put my name out there and so forth. Not so far as home address. I once had to yell at a newspaper to take my signature down.
Wow.
They put my signature up on they released a court document. And so they put my signature in the newspaper. Like the online newspaper as opposed to that. And I was like, could you at least block out my signature, dudes? Like, that's a problem.
Yeah.
So, especially because we've had some instances of people forging lawyers' details in court documents.
Oh, our latest scam is that so there are people who will coordinate with people inside the prison. And what they'll do is they'll get a copy of their legal mail. So they have, picture basically of the lawyer's letterhead and stationery and stuff. And then they will go copy that and they will create, basically fake legal correspondence. And this is turned into a way to smuggle drugs into the prison because they can dip the paper in like liquid meth or something like that. And basically, create it into something that you can recover the meth from. So I learned about this because a friend of mine who also works appeals this happened to her. She, was contacted by Department of Corrections. Hey, we intercepted this contraband. Looked like it's supposed to be from your law office. Can you confirm it's from your law office? And she looks at it and she's like, well, it sort of looks like mine, but no, this is definitely not mine.
Yeah, I've reviewed the file. We don't have a letter like that.
Yeah. No, this is not from me. And yeah, it turns out it's all part of this big idea somebody had worked for a while, and now all it does is just make it take forever for legal mail to get processed in the mailroom. But I guess it worked while it lasted.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing is for all the various people, there's people who are engaged in all sorts of scams, and I've had people try to steal my letterhead.
Mm-hmm.
I actually for a while thought about watermarking my letterhead with the with each thing as to the file number, so as to just so that each letterhead thing couldn't be just photocopied.
Yeah.
Or putting it with like you can print so that it's got fainter text, but then when you try to photocopy it, it all comes out black, and just be like, yep, okay, you're trying to photocopy it and now it just looks hideous. The problem is that now everyone uses color scanners, so
yeah,
those are typically able to resolve those problems.
No, I think you need the embossed stationery. That's your protection, man. If they're going to mimic you, they're going to pay to do it.
What I need to do is there's a the Urian constellation. Have you heard of this?
Mm-mm.
So it's a pattern of 5 rings that they put on money and certain other documents. And most photocopiers have software to detect that. And if they spot it, they will basically go, no, I'm not copying this. So I'm really tempted to like incorporate that now into my legal correspondence, and just so it's like, hey, if you want to photocopy this, like your scanner is going to go, nope, I think you're trying to photocopy money. So no deal. I mean, that's kind of the weird thing about criminal defense is you deal with people who are, decent people. You also deal with people who are trying to scam you.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. You can, as good as your intentions might be, unfortunately, you can kind of only trust your clients so far. There are many that I would like to trust more, but it's very risky to do that.
Fraud clients pay cash. Counterfeiting clients pay by email money transfer. Like it's I had somebody who came in and I looked at their they had about 4 counts of check fraud on their on that was what they're being facing. Yeah. And they're like, here's a check for the retainer, and I'm like,
nope.
You need to know I'm gonna have this checked, and if it doesn't go through, I'm going to have to call the cops on you, and I can't be your lawyer. So I'm just going to set this check back down and look away for a moment, and we can pretend that this never happened if that's where you want to go. So look out the window. Oh, hey, the check is gone. Cool. How did you want to pay your retainer? And they're like, will you take an email money transfer? Yes, I will.
Yes, I would. That sounds great.
Because, I'm like, there is, you just never know when you're sitting there going like, does this person actually have the brass to, to try to pay me with a forged check? And sure enough, yep.
Sure enough.
Well, and the other thing that happens is, I'm sure you get all the fraud emails that are targeting lawyers.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yes.
Yes. The, what do you call it? The people who are like, hey, I have this file that you can take on. And then, if you agree to take it on, there's the rapid settlement. And then I need the money now. And
so I'll give you 90% and it's millions. It's very Nigerian print style.
And every once in a while, we hear reports that lawyers have actually been taken in by that. And I'm always like, really though? Like, really?
Yeah.
I always feel bad, but I'm also still like, but really? Like,
we are an aging profession. I mean, I will say that I can understand that some of the crew may not be so savvy with these new scams.
Well, it also helps that I do criminal law. So when somebody comes after me, comes up to me and is like, this guy owes me for a real estate transaction or whatever, he needs to pay me all this money. And I'm like, cool. That sounds like a great file that you can send to literally anyone else.
Yeah.
And they're like, no, but I want you. And I'm like, that's cool. But like, I don't do this. And
yeah, you honestly don't want me to do this. Trust me. Yeah.
And you don't want me to do this because I'm also the guy who might know how to track you down. Because I do know of one criminal defense lawyer who did get one of those and realized it at the point where he got the sort of rapid payoff and they're like, we need the money now. And he's like, as it turns out, my bank has limited me. I can't send you the money via whatever this. I'll be happy, we can set up an appointment and I'll cut you a check off my, but I have to get signatures to say that you've received it. I don't mail checks this large for my trust account. And they actually sent a dude. And that guy got arrested when he showed up to pick up the money. Yeah, I'm just like, you picked the wrong guy, man. You picked the guy who knew what you were about there.
Yeah, not smart.
Yeah, and this is how it works. You put the, you get paid this money as like a rapid settlement. You throw it into your trust account. The client says, I need the money right now. So you send the client the money. And then the check turns out to be a bad check, and then your trust account is short by however much.
Yeah, and it's 3 days later when the check, doesn't clear or whatever. So there's that time lag is what they're capitalizing on.
Well, and the worst thing is that the check will clear, and then after that they'll detect that it was fraud, and they'll just be like, "Yeah, sorry, the check cleared, but that doesn't mean that it's still not fraud and that you're still not liable for it." So. That's where it gets a lot of people is they're like, they see that the check cleared and they're like, oh, it must be a good check. Nope. So yeah, you got to be careful on all of that one. I see this. If you haven't planned on it, please look for the Today Show interview from the morning before the extradition hearing. It is mind-boggling. We did cover that one. Yep. Just wait, Ian. It gets bad. I mean, there were things I didn't like. It wasn't as bad as I thought. Selena Palfrey, thank you very much for the super chat there. Runkle of the Bailey, why would the extradition lawyer not want to know anything but what he's charged with? 2 reasons. One, I often don't want to hear anything from my clients until I have the full disclosure. Because then I want my client to see that before I get them to tell me their story, because clients aren't always honest. And so, like, I don't want a client to be saying, oh, I wasn't there, I was in another town. And I'm like, but here you are in the video. Like, can we not BS each other? But also, he's the extradition lawyer. It doesn't matter to him if Kohberger's innocent or guilty. It's just, is he getting sent back to Idaho? And the answer to that is yes.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, when he's like, yeah, we're going to sign the extradition thing, it's like, because that was going to happen. There was no other outcome here. So why would he want to know? And he can't do this PR game if he knows. Like, if Kohberger had said, hey, here's what I was doing on these particular days and provided a full statement to him, you can't do any of this.
Yeah, no, none of it. This is all off the table because the risk of that waiver has now just gone through the roof.
Yeah, it's even if he says only good things, right? Like, because if there's any contradiction between your memory of what he says and what he says at trial, they'll burn him on that.
Yeah. And that's the thing. What's a good thing to say? That can change. I mean, that can be very dependent on the rest of the circumstances. So it's just, It's the same reason why you don't talk to the police. You just don't know. Like, yes, you can be doing your best to try to remember in good faith, this is where I was at 5:30 on last Tuesday. And if you're off by 5 minutes, now you're a liar. And now it's consciousness of guilt because you were trying to throw them off your trail. And it's an innocent mistake. You cannot risk an innocent mistake in those situations.
Yeah. I mean, you say like, they say like, you know, where were you on Tuesday? And you're like, well, I'm pretty sure at that time on Tuesday, I was, you know, at work. And it turns out you knew you took a sick day. You just thought it was Wednesday instead of Tuesday. You got that wrong. And now, as you said, you're a liar. And that's so destructive. You just can't do it. So, yep, that's why he would stay the heck away from all of that. Who recorded this? Chris Hansen. I feel like did he just phone them randomly and they're just like, quick, we got to film? Like,
I guess. I mean, I don't know. Surely he had to get consent to film.
Yeah, I don't know. So no allowance for actual time blindness? Not really. They will just assume that. What are the ethics if you know your client is lying? This gets complicated. Where I am, you can't put your client up on the stand to tell lies, but knowing that your client is lying is a tough standard. Mm-hmm. Because it's not just think your client is lying, it's know your client is lying. Mm-hmm. Not suspect, not maybe, not whatever. You got to be fairly confident. But I mean, if your client says, I'm going to get up on the stand to lie, you're like, no, you're not. But the other thing is, there's certain situations, like if your client has indicated that they've done it, you can still run a defense of prove it. But there is a defense that takes off the table. I can't argue third party committed the offense if my client has told me that they've done it. I can't be like, what, it could have been Bob. Mm-hmm. Because then Bob could end up going to jail if I really do my job well, and convince everyone that Bob is the real guy. So they don't want me basically framing another dude in order to defend my client. Is it sort of similar where you are?
Yeah, very, very similar. I think you put that really well. The issue is always knowing, what do you know? And that's the big gray area in the situation. I wasn't there, so I don't know what actually happened. Common situation that comes up. Okay, your client has told you, conflicting. They've given you different versions. I don't know which one is the correct one. These are parts of the problems that you kind of struggle with. I can guess that the statement you came up with, that changed your version after you got the police report and saw what the evidence was, I can infer that might not be honest. But I don't know. That's kind of me guessing. So it's a fairly tough standard. I have never had to, pull a client off the stand or move to withdraw because I knew that my client was lying. Never have had to deal with that. I think a lot of the times anyway, with that type of client, you're able to suss out they're not going to probably be a very good witness, if it's that easy to figure out that your sketch and your story is not lining up, then why would I want you on the stand anyway? You're likely to hurt your case.
And I mean, the other thing is that sometimes clients lie to us too. I had one guy, he's young guy, sort of in his 20s, and his parents are paying his legal defenses. So you can already see that there is a connection there with his parents, and his parents are super freaking religious, like super religious. They come in, they wanted to pray with me, and I'm like, that's not a service I offer. Like, you're going to have to go elsewhere for that. But they were praying in, my waiting room, and, my guy's giving me an account of his day that I'm just like, this is some bullshit. I don't believe this guy for a second. He's making this up. And I'm like, I can't put you up on the stand because you might be telling me the truth, but I don't believe you. and nobody else will either.
Mhm.
And so finally, after ages, I found out where he actually was, which is he was with his boyfriend. And he really didn't want his parents to know.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I was able to get the police to privately talk to the boyfriend and confirm that that was the case. And they're like, yep, this is fine. So that goes away, right? That file goes away. But like, people got all sorts of reasons for things. You get people who are stepping out on their wives who are just like, I don't want to tell you what I was doing that day. It's like, well, you're looking at 3 years in jail, sir. So figure it out like right now.
I've heard some horror stories from some old estate planning lawyers about, the couple that's been married for 60 years coming in to update the will. And, the husband has to pull the lawyer aside for a private meeting about, the child that the wife doesn't know about that has to be accounted for in the estate planning. I mean, there are lots of things like that motivate people to not be fully honest.
Yep. And, I was visiting my second family is like, that's a hell of a motivation.
Yeah.
I mean, I had to tell new girlfriend at one point. I was like, listen, I can't tell you what's going on, but if you actually love this guy and that's between you and him, you should not attend the trial.
Mm-hmm.
And she's like, why? And I'm like, I cannot tell you that. And the reason why is that she's like the third girlfriend.
Yeah.
I can't throw him under the bus by telling her that. It's just like, you need to not be at his trial if you care about him. And so she wasn't. And I'm like, it is what it is. I might have been like, just fine if she'd showed, like, I feel bad for like the world at all of this is going on, but my duty is to my client. And,
100%.
So it's rough. Parents hate this because parents love to be involved, and kids will lie all the time to keep their parents from finding out what they were doing.
Yes. Yes.
Including stuff that's like super freaking innocent. Like, I have a girlfriend and, we were out like at the mall. Like, they think their parents are going to freak out.
This particular game that they play that's like not cool.
Yeah, I'm not allowed to play this video game, but I was at my friend's house playing the video game.
Yeah.
And it's like, you're up on a robbery, kid.
Yeah.
Like, you got to figure out your priorities on this one and you do your best. And sometimes the discussion is like, you got to assess like the consequences here. Yeah, your dad's going to be super pissed.
Mm-hmm.
But like, your dad's not going to throw you in jail. And I mean, the other thing is that sometimes you got to deal with like child clients whose parents are abusive as hell. And so
exactly,
that's its own
wrinkle.
Thing.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I had one where this kid was staying everywhere but his parents' house. Like, he was sleeping on friends' couches and whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And the prosecutor was like, I want this kid to have a condition that, got to go back and live with his parents. And I'm like, you need to know the reason why he's not staying there is because he's getting abused.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, and I'm like, it's real bad. Like, you think that this kid is sleeping on his friends' couches for funsies?
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, yeah. I'm like, we're not doing this condition. And thankfully the prosecutor like dropped that. I was like, yeah, you gotta, people who grew up in like good houses and so forth tend to assume that everyone else is.
Yes, exactly.
And so you get prosecutors who are like, hey, why don't they just go and, follow the rules of the household? I'm like, because the parents are terrible. And Rob is exactly right here. Jay Baffo was saying, the Waldman Depot is talking about like the consequences of a lawyer talking.
If you're gonna be the wartime conciliary, you're gonna pay the cost for that.
Yep. Runkle, love how you say against you and about in Canadian. Just the accent there. I just seeing these interviews keep firing back in the public eye. The more the lawyer talks, the more the public hears, I'm a lawyer who's giving up everything to reaffirm everyone's conviction that he's guilty. Yeah, I mean, there is some of that, but I mean, people are going to say that anyway, right?
Yeah.
Everybody out there has already decided that he's guilty before they've heard like whether or not he's actually guilty. Runkle, he's the chief PD. Isn't it client privilege when he starts saying, then he said, and I told him I wouldn't want my PD to talk so much. Again, if they don't have if he doesn't have a deal like worked out with a waiver, and I would want like 4 copies of that in my file, then his career is getting blown up. But I think he's got to have that.
Yeah.
Oh mon Dieu, première fois que je vois un livre. You're one of my favorite law tubers. Well, welcome aboard. And I like the, I hope I didn't mangle the French too bad, but translation of
fantastic.
Oh my God, first time I've seen a live. So it's, do you speak French?
Un tout petit peu. Il y a longtemps. Mais j'ai habité en Belgique quand j'avais 14 ans.
I'm in the same boat. I can switch my thinking to French so long as I'm in a place where I speak French, but it takes a few days.
Yes,
so,
it does. What I've lost is the words. I don't remember everything about the language and how to put, how the vocabulary works, how the grammar works, all that stuff. But I have forgotten the words for everything, and I have to be immersed in it again for it to all start to come back.
And I mean, the other thing is, for French, the genders of everything, like, is the table a male table or a female table?
Yes.
Like, is crack male or female? Like, all of these things, right? And some of those things, when you're talking like legal topics, it gets hard to ask people like, hey, I'm gonna phone up a random friend and just be like, so is heroin male or female? And they're like, why? I'm like, I got reasons. They're like, do you have a French dealer? I'm like, no. But yeah, it's it takes, my wife and I went to Paris, and like the first couple of days I was just like random English tourist, and everybody's like, let me talk to you in English. And after that, I was just able to have conversations in French. And my wife is like, she speaks some Spanish. And so the funny thing is that her brain interprets the French as Spanish.
Oh, that's funny. Yeah, I could see that. It makes sense. So
she'd keep speaking Spanish to like waiters in Paris, and they were like, what? And so, yeah, that fun times. This one, I should have gotten to that ages ago. Jerry J, thank you very much for the very generous super chat there. Hi from the Emirates. Love this new episode. Such a great combination. Perfect complementing styles. So clever and witty. So fun. I love your side comments and hilarious examples. Thank you for everything you do. Hope you can do this regularly. Yeah. Andrea's one of my favorite people. So it's true. It's just insightful comment. And I think we get along well and we banter well, which is good, because you don't want to just be like two people kind of not meshing, if that makes sense.
Yes. Good chemistry.
Absolutely. Yep. Rob here. We covered this one. This was the joke being misunderstood. Equality. So nice listening to both of you. You two always show me different perspectives. Love you both. Thank you, guys. I feel like the law is important in that sense, because you got to look at different perspectives. Mm-hmm. You just have to, because
it's part of the practice. It's part of being a good lawyer, is anticipating the opposing argument. If you can't do that, you're not going to be effective as an advocate. So you have to be able to look at things from all kinds of different perspectives in order to be able to do your job.
Yep. If you can't argue the other side's case, then you don't understand your case well enough, right? You don't understand the issue there. So, yeah. When I was, when I've been doing appellate work, I sit down and I'm like, how do I rip my case apart? Mm-hmm. Like, what would I attack me on that one? Because otherwise,
Yeah.
Somebody's going to attack you.
You better steel man it, because otherwise the court is going to see those holes that you didn't bother to fill. You would much rather deal with this in briefing than an oral argument.
Yeah, and I went to the Supreme Court. I can tell you, I practiced all of the questions I did not want to answer.
Mm-hmm.
And I got asked all of them. You know, because that's how they roll. They're not going to like let you off easy. So, do you think the defense will bring up the fact that Steve Gosney still hasn't found his missing K-bar? I feel like that's a joke that I don't get. So probably not. I don't know. Please check Twitter DM for kitchen interview with Labar video coming from chat or in general chat on Rule of Law Discord. I think we've covered all of the videos at this point, but there's so many. TikTok was asking this repeatedly. Hey, Runkle of the Bailey, are you ever going to do a video on the arrest of a BC YouTuber, Dan, who was arrested and prosecuted for public photography? His channel is News Now Victoria. I'll have to look into that. One thing I will say, and this is without knowing anything about the case, typically people's public description of their case and the actual case kind of come close, but never actually touch.
Yeah. That's so diplomatically put.
They tend to leave out some critical details. And so I've had a number of people who've approached me going, hey, I want you to talk about my case. And I look into it and I'm like, no, you don't.
You trust me, you really don't want me to look at this case.
Yeah, I'm just going to pretend I've never heard of this one, because if I talk about this one, it's just going to make your life worse.
Yeah.
And they're like, why? I'm like, because the details you didn't tell me are X, Y, and Z, and they make you look real bad.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that. So I got to look into that one, because it might be that he's 100% in the right, or it might not be. So I don't know what the story is. I'll have to look into it. Please help. Jen's woodworking therapy dog needs to be euthanized and cremated. Oh, that's tragic. She needs some help.
Sad.
GoFundMe, help Suki cross the Rainbow Bridge. I saw that on Twitter and I retweeted it. I will look into it a little further when I'm not, running a stream, which is fairly quick here. We're down to just a few here. I don't want a lawyer who has diarrhea mouth, waiver or not. If I need a mouthpiece to talk to the press, I'll use a PR person, not a former lawyer. I can guarantee you he can't afford a PR person.
Yeah, I was going to say the message here is really you get what you pay for.
Yeah, I mean, I would love a PR person if I was in Kohberger's shoes, but I can tell you that PR person is starting off with like, hey, I need 25 grand to get started. And, it's going to cost you another 10 to do like 4 statements. And if you're on a public defender, like he was declared indigent. So,
yeah. No, this is definitely a make it work strategy.
Yeah, they're doing the best with what they've got. And I mean, the alternative is to say nothing. And that is sort of the dominant strategy on this one. But I can't say if it's the right one. I think I would do the other thing. But it's tough. Whoop. Rosie, thank you for the new membership. And Jeremy Morton, great conversation tonight, guys. I'm really glad to hear you two talk. Well, thank you. So that, we've sort of hit the end of the super chats. Yeah, so say nothing, zip it then. I mean, that may be the better option. This is not Vegas. Don't gamble. I mean, he's got to gamble either way. Either thing is a gamble. So I don't know. I mean, I don't think he's doing this for his own personal aggrandizement, because I don't think this is going to help him. I don't think this is going to help his career. And he's a public defender, so it's not like he needs to recruit clients or anything like that. I think ultimately he is trying to help his client. I don't know if it's the best way. I'm torn. It's a strategy is what it comes down to. This does appear to be something they're doing intentionally for a reason. And I don't think I would do the same thing, but I could be wrong here. Kohberger's in a lot of trouble. I think that's kind of an understatement. I have never been in I've had all sorts of times when I thought I was in trouble, and I've never been in as much trouble as he's in now. So, what do you do in a situation like that? Every option that you have is panic. See, well, it's not working clearly. Nothing is going to like solve everything right now. So, yeah. And I see somebody was sort of going, why is this taking so, I have attention deficit. I wander. So talking about like sitting here sewing, I just fiddle with things. So I've got, this project is, partway along. So that is, I'm going to finish this up tonight. But sometimes in order for my brain to function on anything, I need to do more than one thing at once. It's just a thing. Rob will catch me. Rob, I saw has stepped out, but Rob will catch me because he's one of the people who can spot it. Sometimes I will play a video game while I'm also streaming because that's just my brain. So, yeah, it's this one. I don't know if it's working out because I don't know if you can see it. It's supposed to have darker blue around the edges, but the two colors of blue and navy blue end up being a little too similar. So, like, can you tell the difference between those? I don't feel that I can necessarily. So, it'll just end up being blue. That's what it comes down to. It's just going to be blue. So, plus your Galaxy Fidget Cube, Runkle of the Bailey. Guess what? I put my Fidget Cube down somewhere and I haven't been able to find it. So, yeah, it is where it is. It's weird for you to craft during a stream, different energy, and not looking at 3 screens at once. I'm always doing several things at once. All right. I'm going to wrap this up. I'm guessing Andrea's probably done for the night. Her connection was sort of shaky at the outset, but we're also wrapping up. I'm going to go catch up on... I'm going to go catch up on... what is it? Ricada's got Rittenhouse on. So thank you for joining me if you were competing with that. But yeah, I'm going to go sort of catch up on that. Anyway, thank you guys all for joining me. Thank you again to Andrea for joining me. Check out her channel. She does great work. If you are not subscribed, you should be subscribed because she's fantastic. So see you guys next time.